Chapter 845. Jiang Pingji said. This place is secluded enough. Yumo, just say what you want to say. Cheng Jing looked at Jiang Pingji helplessly. She was the one who initiated it. How did it turn into him seducing her? What should he say? He had nothing to say. Because of the seal on his hand, Cheng Jing could sense that the demon was nearby. He became more vigilant. He said, "It's a long story," Jiang Pingji said. "It's okay. You can make it short." Cheng Jing was speechless. The audience in the streaming room burst into laughter. Cheng Jing was Huang Song's counselor, not his own counselor. He shouldn't bully him like that. Fortunately, Cheng Jing had good mental fortitude. His expression only froze for a moment before returning to normal. His mind raced as he searched for the ink in his stomach. Very quickly, he fabricated a plausible urgent matter. Jiang Pingji was very cooperative. She either nodded or frowned. Occasionally, she even gave her opinion. Cheng Jing secretly sighed. The magistrate of Liuzhou was also a talent. His ability to fabricate nonsense was no weaker than his own. They talked as they walked. Jiang Pingji's attention seemed to be attracted by Cheng Jing's words. The moonlight that was as cold as water shone down, elongating their shadows. They went around a rockery. Their field of view was facing the direction of the moon. In front of them was a dense cluster of abandoned rockery. The shadows were thick. If something was hidden there, no one would be able to find it. As time passed, Cheng Jing's heartbeat became louder and faster. It was almost in his throat. He felt a scorching heat on the back of his right hand. He knew that the demon was nearby. She was less than 10 feet away from him. At that moment he heard a roar. A dark blue light attacked Jiang Pingji from the shadows in front of him. What are you waiting for? Surrender. Everything happened too suddenly. Cheng Jing instinctively made a defensive move, trying to block the strange blue light. However, he was just a scholar with weak martial arts skills. By the time he stood in front of Jiang Pingji, the light had already hit her. Cheng Jing's face darkened when he saw that. A graceful woman walked out from the shadows of the rockery and clapped her hands in appreciation. You did well. If you didn't help distract Lu Shi and lower his guard, I'm afraid it wouldn't have been so easy. Earlier, the woman had ordered Cheng Jing to be her meat shield. Therefore, Cheng Jing's actions just now were seen by the woman as proof of his loyalty. Cheng Jing secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. With a calm expression, he moved sideways and retreated to the side. However, his hand was placed on the hilt of the sword at his waist. The woman calmly stepped forward and giggled. She circled Jiang Pingji twice and sized her up with a critical gaze. Not bad, Lu Shi. The woman stood in front of Jiang Pingji and suddenly reached out her hand to pinch Jiang Pingji's chin. She used a lot of strength and forced Jiang Pingji to lift her head. You don't look good. You look like a man. Is Lu Shi Lu Shi? Jiang said. I don't. Is. With the help of the moonlight, Cheng Jing saw that Jiang Pingji's expression was blank. There were traces of slackness in her eyes, like a piece of wood. His heart thumped fiercely, and the hand that was holding the hilt of his sword tightened. His slender knuckles tightened, revealing a little pale. The woman wasn't satisfied. She pushed Jiang Pingji to the craggy rockery with a vicious look in her eyes. Come, kneel down and lick my toes. At the side, Cheng Jing's arrogance soared. How dare this monster humiliate others like this? Just as he was about to draw his sword, Jiang Pingji waved her right hand at him, signaling him to move away. Cheng Jing was speechless. He had met the ancestor of acting. The woman didn't let go. She changed her mind. She looked at Cheng Jing, who was watching Jiang Pingji's performance, and curled her finger at him. Come here. Cheng. An innocent spectator? Cheng Jing was speechless. He took a few steps forward, but his mind was much more relaxed. He wanted to see what kind of show was going to happen next. I'll give her to you today. She's still a virgin. On the other side, the streaming room was in an uproar. The audience had been following the stream for many years. They had never seen Jiang Pingji treated like that. That woman pinched the streamer's chin with her claws, pushed her to the rockery, and made her kneel and lick her toes? Lick your balls. If that wasn't enough, she wanted to humiliate the streamer's body? How despicable. Sai Weiyan. I have a curse that I want to throw in her face right now. Muzhong. Is the streamer bewitched? Wake up. The fairy queen's crimson. Cheng Jing, if you King touch the streamer's finger, I'll crawl along the cable and chop you up. There were only a few comments on the bullet screen, but it exploded in an instant, flooding the screen like a blowout. Then an orange-yellow bullet screen caught their attention. Host V. I forgot to inform you that I'll be increasing the number of people in the streaming room. According to the plan, the streaming room will be connected to another dimension. When the time comes, I'll broadcast it to the audience in both dimensions. The streaming room has limited seats. Remember to subscribe. The 150,000 viewers were speechless. Their anger was extinguished by Jiang Pingji's notice. Handsome white rabbit. Damn it. The drama queen is cheating my feelings. At the same time, Cheng Jing's face turned green. He was enraged. The evildoer didn't know, but he knew that Jiang Pingji was sober. Lu Shi was the governor of Wanzhou. How could she treat him like an ordinary woman? In Cheng Jing's opinion, even touching the corner of someone else's clothes was blasphemy, let alone physical humiliation. More importantly, what if the governor of Liuzhou bore a grudge? Cheng Jing felt his vision darken. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to walk out of Wanzhou. Even if his worldview collapsed, Cheng Jing still didn't reveal any flaws. To put it bluntly, among the 3 people present, except for the woman, the other 2 were Oscar winners. The Oscars owed them so many little golden figures that they could bankrupt the Oscars. The woman smiled at Jiang Pingji and said, Look at you. You've been dressing as a man for so many years. I bet you don't even know what a woman is, do you? I'll fulfill your wish today. You've killed me several times in the past. You should have known that this day would come. The river flows east for 30 years, and then west for 30 years. The wheel of fortune turns. You've fallen into my hands. This is your retribution. Cheng Jing, what are you waiting for? I'll reward you. After saying that, the woman pinched Jiang Pingji's chin and threw her toward Cheng Jing. Cheng Jing wanted to dodge sideways. He didn't dare touch her, lest the other party came to settle scores with him and get him involved. Jiang Pingji was thrown by the woman like a puppet. Her toes had just left the ground when something happened in the next second. She adjusted her center of gravity in midair and grabbed the woman's wrist. Suddenly, she sank and grabbed the other party. Her right hand was like a spirit snake that wrapped around the woman's neck. With a grab and a lift, she threw the woman from the left to the right. Chapter 846. The woman was caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. Before she could restrain the smugness on her face, she was already under someone else's control. Lu Shi, you're not being controlled? Why aren't you being controlled? TCH, are you trying to trick me? The woman was anxious and helpless. Her heart was pounding in her left chest. She could not help but think of the fear of being controlled by Jiang Pingji. Impossible. You must be being controlled. The woman tried to struggle, but Jiang Pingji was terrifyingly strong. No matter what she did, the woman remained motionless. She was about to go crazy. It's a lie. It's impossible that you're not being controlled. Let me go. Jiang Pingji restrained her and said strangely, You're so unreasonable. Are you the only one allowed to plot against me, murder me, and control me? But I'm not allowed to defend myself? What kind of rule is that? At the end of the day, it's obvious that your skills are inferior. How can you blame your opponent for being too strong? I suddenly thought of a saying that suits you. You don't have the life of a princess, but you're infected with the princess disease. She directly poked at the woman's weak spot. The woman became angry from embarrassment and struggled even more violently. Jiang Pingji's scolding was too vicious. Cheng Jing could not help but sneer. His actions reminded the woman. The woman was like a drowning person. She desperately wanted to hold on to the last straw. Flustered and exasperated, she said, Cheng Jing, kill her. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, Yumo's martial arts are inferior to mine. How can he kill me? The woman said angrily, Lu Shi, if you kill Cheng Jing, do you think Huang Song can still maintain his sibling relationship with you? Jiang Pingji tilted her head in surprise. She glanced at the motionless Cheng Jing and smiled. I thought your brain had been eaten by pigs. I didn't expect you to still have some left. But what's the use of that? I'll give you a piece of advice. Remember it in your next life. Don't think that you're the only smart person in the world. People who think they're smart often die miserably. I won't hurt Yumo. But before you give the order, you have to make sure that he's not being controlled by you. Jiang Pingji's words pierced the woman's spleen and lungs. The woman was so angry that her eyes turned red and overflowed with intense hatred. The woman was panting. Her hair was messy, her cheeks flushed red, and the corners of her eyes shone with tears. Beside him, Cheng Jing fell silent. If he did not know the cause and effect, he would have thought that Governor Liu was bent like a mosquito coil and was about to destroy a flower. Cheng Jing, kill her. Hurry up and kill her trash. The woman refused to believe it. She couldn't control Lu Shi, but could she not control a stupid ancient man? Cheng Jing let out a long sigh when his name was called out again. He said to Jiang Pingji, Magistrate of Liuzhou, should I give way? This was said to Jiang Pingji, but it was also a disguised rejection of the woman's order. The slap to the face came too quickly, like a tornado. She said to Cheng Jing in the tone of a considerate little princess, Move aside, move aside. The next scene is too bloody. I'm afraid it'll scare you. Cheng Jing pretended to be temporarily deaf. He glanced coldly at the demon, who was being suppressed by Jiang Pingji, and left without any reluctance. The last bit of blood drained from the woman's face. After a while she said fiercely, Lu Shi, you can't kill me. I will come back for revenge. Revenge on everyone around you. Jiang Pingji smiled and tightened her grip. She looked at the woman mockingly. The woman's face turned purple because of the lack of oxygen. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness, and her eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Just as the woman was about to die, Jiang Pingji loosened her grip again. A large amount of fresh air poured into the woman's mouth and nose. She coughed and breathed greedily. The feeling of being on the verge of death, but not dying, was too terrifying. She did not have the courage to try it a second time. If you have any grudges, come at me. I can at least respect you. You shouldn't have set your eyes on the people around me. Jiang Pingji said with a smile. Her calm voice added some gentleness, but the woman did not feel any warmth. Instead, she trembled all over. The woman trembled and said shakily, I can't die. I will come back. Lu Shi, don't ever let me get the chance. Otherwise, I will make sure you end up like that shameless mother of yours. Just you wait. Jiang Pingji said with a smile. You've already threatened me. Do you think I will give you a chance to rise again? Perhaps it was because she knew she was going to die. The woman regained some calmness. She had the system and countless chances to start over. She could afford to lose. At most, she would continue to owe a huge debt to the system. The woman said crazily, You can't kill me. At that moment, Jiang Pingji moved closer to her ear. Her hot breath hit her earlobe with a burning temperature. Are you sure? The woman's heart skipped a beat. She pretended to be tough and said, If you don't believe me, why don't you try killing me? For her, death was a form of escape. As long as she died, her soul would appear in the system space, and she could make a comeback. Jiang Pingji pressed her lips against the woman's ear and said something. The woman's face turned pale, and she trembled even more violently. She did not say anything else. She only said one thing. From just now until now, haven't you realized that your biggest backer has not made a sound? System? Right. Why hasn't the system said anything? The woman called out to the system in her heart. But no matter how many times she called out, the result was like a stone sinking into the ocean. There was no response at all. She became more and more flustered. Why hasn't the system responded? Jiang Pingji seemed to know what she was thinking. She said with a smile, The system is not omnipotent. It can't even protect itself now. How can it care about a useless person like you? The woman shook her head in disbelief. Her face was full of fear. She did not care that her vitals were being clamped by Jiang Pingji. She stretched out her well-maintained hands and grabbed the ground. She did not care even if her nails were broken. She just wanted to crawl away. She did not want to be so close to Jiang Pingji. What kind of person could cause the system to be at a loss for what to do? Lu Shi, spare me, spare my life. The woman's face was covered with tears of fear. The bruises left by the suffocation had not completely faded. Coupled with her shrill screams, she actually had the demeanor of a ferocious ghost. She begged for mercy. Please spare my life. Beg? Isn't it too late now? Jiang Pingji asked her with a smile. Downwind was as mad as a dog. Against the wind he knelt and begged. Speaking of which, could she have a little backbone? Spare me. I'll tell you a secret. Don't you want to know how your mother Gu Min died? The woman cried until her tears and snot dripped down her face. There was no trace of a peerless beauty. She was so embarrassed that she looked like a crazy woman. She said, "Let me go this time. Just let me go this time. I won't go against you anymore. I'll tell you who killed Gu Min." The audience in the streaming room was eating melons with a smile. They felt that today's streaming was not boring. They were waiting for the streamer to kill the demon again. They never thought that it would involve the past of the previous generation. Didn't the streamer's mother die of natural causes? Jiang Pingji lowered her eyelids and sneered. Didn't you kill my 2 brothers and cause my mother to die of a serious illness? The woman pounded the ground in anger. Her eyes were full of hatred. Chapter 847. Mother and father loved each other very much. Why would father kill her? Please find a good reason to sow discord. The woman's face stiffened. She immediately cried out, "Your mother is a time traveler." A time traveler is someone from another world. Lu Shi thought her body was possessed by evil spirits. How could he not be afraid? If you don't believe me, you can look at Xie Qian. When Xie Qian found out that Wang Huiyan was a time traveler, he also wanted to kill her. I'm telling the truth. If I deliberately sow discord between you and your father, I will die a horrible death. A time traveler? Someone from another world? Jiang Pingji pretended not to know and asked, "Are you telling the truth?" It's absolutely true. The real Gu Min is actually an idiot. Everyone who used to serve Gu Min knows that she didn't know how to speak even when she was 4 years old. The woman called out to the system in her heart. Her voice was trembling as she told the system what she knew. The person who married Lu Shi in the end wasn't Gu Min. It was Gu Min's stepsister Gu Zhen. That woman was shameless. She took advantage of the fact that she knew the history to steal her own brother-in-law. She even pushed Gu Zhen to Meng Zhan, that bastard. Lu Shi accidentally found out the truth. That's why he planned to assassinate Gu Min. Although I killed your 2 brothers, I really didn't kill you. Jiang Pingji seemed to be convinced. Although she didn't let go of the woman, she obviously loosened her grip. Go on. Tell me everything you know. The woman realized in despair that she really couldn't contact the system. In order to survive, she could only take a gamble. I also accidentally found out that Gu Min is a time traveler. Later, I searched her soul and found out that she came from 300 years in the future. She knew the history, so she stole Gu Zhen's husband. She's a shameless B***tch. Lu Shi is an ancient person. Of course he is afraid of ghosts and gods, so he murdered Gu Min. I'm telling the truth, please don't kill me. Jiang Pingji heard and snorted mockingly. The woman seemed to think of something and hurriedly said, Lu Shi still wants to kill you. In Gu Min's memory, you will kill Lu Shi in the end. Now that he knows about this, it won't be easy for you to kill him in the future. He will kill you in advance. Because of her panic, she spoke incoherently. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, Do you think I will believe you? If my father really wanted to kill me, he would have done so long ago. The woman cried, Because you are the founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty, the future Emperor Qin. Of course, Lu Shi won't let you die now. The founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty? The woman nodded like she was pounding garlic. She said, Yes. The founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty. I searched Gu Min's soul and discovered that she came from the future 300 years ago. Her maiden name was Lanting, but when Lu Lanting was 12 years old, she met bandits and lost her memory. She forgot that she was Lu Lanting and changed her surname to Jiang Pingji. She even killed her own brother. This is what I saw from Gu Min's memory. Later she killed Lu Shi, who was captured by the feudal vassals. She killed her own father. Seeing that Jiang Pingji was unmoved, the woman continued, Even if Lu Shi doesn't kill you now, he will definitely kill you in the future. Because you're the daughter of a demon, why wouldn't he be afraid? But in order to become the emperor, he has to treat you well. You have to believe me. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, If I really become the emperor one day, do you think my father can still kill me? He didn't do anything to me now, and he won't do anything to me in the future. You sowed discord and urged me to kill my father. You have ulterior motives and evil intentions. The woman's face was twisted. She never expected that she would not be able to persuade Jiang Pingji, after so much persuasion. After a while she said, "You asked me before. You asked me if it was because of me that your mother almost died." Jiang Pingji said calmly, "I already know the answer to this question. Even if you answer it, it's of no value to me. You know?" The woman widened her eyes in surprise. Jiang Pingji nodded. "I know." The two looked at each other. And the woman suddenly laughed wildly. She laughed so hard that tears came out of her eyes. Yes. You know, I'm the stupid one." Jiang Pingji said again. "Are you done? If you are, prepare to be on your way." The woman's arrogant laughter stopped abruptly. Her eyes widened like copper bells, and the whites of her eyes were horrifying. "You want to kill me?" Jiang Pingji said faintly. "I never said I won't kill you, right? You're the one who thinks too highly of yourself." Her words extinguished the last glimmer of hope in the woman's heart. "In your next life, be a good person." Jiang Pingji spoke as if she was chatting with an old friend. In this world, everyone's life is precious. The so-called poverty refers to wealth, not life. You have an advantage that ordinary people don't. But that's not an excuse for you to disregard human life. You think you're lucky enough to get a powerful cheat. But how do you know that the other party doesn't have the intention to harm you? To be honest, Jiang Pingji could not bear to kill her. No matter what, it was a daily pastime. If it was gone, she would be lonely in the future. "Forgive me this time. I won't harm you anymore. I really won't harm you. I won't be the heroine." The woman vaguely realized that she did not have the chance to load the file again. Her fear of death overrode everything else. "It's too late to say all this now. When you were harming others, did you ever think about this day?" Faced with the threat of death, the woman suddenly exerted all her strength to fight, but Jiang Pingji already knew her intentions. "Ugh!" She stuck out her tongue. The strong feeling of suffocation made her consciousness blur. Her eyeballs were bulging out of their sockets with fine blood vessels. Suddenly, there was a crisp sound of bones breaking. Scarlet blood gushed out from her mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. Her violently struggling body slowly softened. Her eyes were wide open, and she died with a grievance. She looked like a malicious ghost. Where was the charm of a beautiful woman? Jiang Pingji murmured. "I wanted to keep you to amuse me, but who asked you to lay your hands on Cheng Jing?" Up to this day, Jiang Pingji had also miscalculated. Fortunately, the deviation was not big. Everything was still under her control. She thought that by deliberately using the level 9 loyalty talisman, the woman would focus on her and not lay her hands on the people around her. She did not know that the woman was greedy. She tried to control Cheng Jing. Who knew if she would lay her hands on Wei Ci and the others in the future? A woman who had nothing to lose was not afraid of wearing shoes. Jiang Pingji could not afford to gamble. Considering the risks, she decided to get rid of this hidden danger once and for all, even if it was not a good time to reel in the net. Using her spirit to disperse the woman's remaining source of spiritual waves, Jiang Pingji's right hand brushed over the woman's body. After a while, another strange source of spiritual waves appeared in her mental brain. It was the subsystem of the woman's body. In order to distinguish Jiang Pingji's and the woman's systems, they were temporarily labeled as System 1 and System 2. Jiang Pingji said mischievously, "System, I've sent your brother here." Chapter 848. Ugh, it's not a good habit to swear. Aren't you afraid that you'll lead the children astray? I'll send the system itself over one day, and you can play landlord with 3 people. Jiang Pingji said with a smile. She wasn't affected at all. Instead, the 2 systems were fuming with anger. What landlord? Why didn't you just play mahjong with the 4 of you? System number 2 was still confused. Its connection with the host was cut off by Jiang Pingji, and it watched as she killed the host and scattered the host's soul. This was completely different from the script it had expected. That was not all. Before it could escape, its vision went black, and it was locked in a field of spiritual energy. System number 2 asked, "Where is this?" Jiang Pingji said, "My spiritual brain region." She grabbed the system on the time-traveling woman's body. The 2 streaming rooms were forced to upgrade, and were currently entering the maintenance phase. Before entering the maintenance phase, she sent a message to the audience in her streaming room, asking them to hurry up and grab a seat the next day. System number 2 tried to break free, but the suppression around it was too strong. It couldn't escape at all. Near it, system number 1, which was a few times smaller than it, said coldly, "Stop struggling, stop." System number 2 only realized system number 1's situation at that moment, and it was even more confused. Why are you imprisoned? Because the information between the systems was not interconnected, it still didn't know that its fellow sufferer had suffered inhumane treatment. System number 1 snorted coldly. It didn't want to talk to this idiot. System number 2 calmed down, and its heart sank. It felt that the script was completely different from what it had expected. It said hesitantly, "This spiritual brain region isn't normal. Abnormally strong." System number 1 continued to sneer. "You've been with that stupid woman for too long. Even your IQ has been dragged down by her?" System number 2 was silent. It thought of a terrible guess. How could you possess such a host? You're still helping her? If it had encountered such a ghost, it would have left a long time ago. System number 1 said lifelessly, "Which of your dog eyes saw me helping her?" It was also a prisoner now, okay? It wasn't worried about anything but the main body of the system. Looking at Jiang Pingji's reaction recently, she seemed to have found out the truth, which made it anxious. As a higher life form, it had never felt so powerless before. Of the hosts it had met in the past, 9 out of 10 were idiots, and 1 was a smartass. Which one of them wasn't fooled by it? Unfortunately, the heavenly axiom was good at reincarnation. This time, the person who was fooled was him. System number 2 was the first to be separated. Once it was separated, it and the main body of the system became 2 separate entities, and there were many things it did not know. It thought it was number 1's idea to look for Jiang Pingji, so it complained, "Why did you find such a host? How was this an enslaved host? It was clearly an ancestor." System number 1 sneered, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't choose it either. Who knew that the chosen one would be so hard to deal with?" There were countless planes in the world, and each plane was equivalent to an independent entity. The better the living beings on the plane grew and flourished, the more the plane would receive in return. The so-called system was actually a parasite that traversed the various planes and secretly absorbed their origin energy. Planes also had their own consciousness. In order to let the living beings on the plane develop better, the so-called chosen one came into existence. If the system did not intervene, according to the original trajectory, Jiang Pingji would create a brand new dynasty and give back more benefits to the plane. The result? The small sapling that was the plane had been targeted by the parasite, the system. According to previous experience, as long as the chosen one was killed, and then it absorbed the origin energy of the plane step by step, it would basically be stable. System number 2 screamed loudly, "She's the chosen one? That scared me to death." System number 1 said gloomily, "If she's not the chosen one, why would the main body split me again?" It thought it could bring disaster to the chosen one that the plane favored, but it didn't expect that she was basically a disaster that specialized in harming the system. It really didn't know where the low-level plane, which was still in a backward civilization, could capture such a soul. It was so F***ing disgusting. System number 2 was instantly stunned. It said anxiously, "What do we do now? You and I are the same. If you ask me, who should I ask?" The system was flustered and exasperated. "Can you still contact the main body?" System number 2 said dejectedly, "No." As early as when it was forcibly bound to the previous host's body by Jiang Pingji, it could not contact the main body. At that time, it knew that Jiang Pingji was not to be trifled with, but it never thought that she would be so troublesome. Not only could she threaten it, but she could also threaten the main body. "Just wait." System number 1 panted heavily and said fiercely, "Jiang Pingji is quite conceited. She will fall hard. Fortunately, your stupid host still has some brains, and didn't give up the real main body. Otherwise, the main body might also be captured by Jiang Pingji. Then with 1 master and 2 sons, the 3 systems could play landlord." At that moment, Jiang Pingji's voice sounded in the spiritual brain. She said, I think both of you are quite stupid. This is my spiritual brain. I am the god here. I can hear whatever you are whispering about. Are you sure you want to continue talking? Jiang Pingji laughed and teased while destroying the corpse. The two systems were as quiet as chickens. Her ears were finally at peace. Sigh. Reincarnate into a good life in your next life. If you still have the chance to be reincarnated. Jiang Pingji clapped her hands. The corpse on the ground had completely ignited. From time to time, there was the sound of an explosion. Cheng Jing was guarding from afar. When he saw the fire, he suppressed his emotions and hurried over. Magistrate Liu, has that demon been executed? Yes. Look at your hand. Are the traces still there? Cheng Jing was delighted. He raised his hand and removed the white cloth on his right hand. He saw that the area that was originally covered with ugly black lines had returned to its normal color. He solemnly bowed and said gratefully, Thank you, Magistrate, for saving my life. The black lines disappeared. He felt that his body was a little lighter. His originally dizzy mind seemed to have been dispelled and saw the sun. He was much clearer. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and helped him up. She said with a smile, You don't have to thank me. This matter is also my fault. I should have gotten rid of her earlier. Cheng Jing did not know that Jiang Pingji deliberately left a backup plan to give the time traveler a chance to make a comeback. Speaking of which, if it were not for Jiang Pingji, Cheng Jing would not have suffered such an undeserved calamity. Chapter 849. Day's Village, an unknown small place in the Jiang dynasty. There were only 100 families in this village, and it didn't take long for the people at the end of the village to know what happened at the head of the village. Today, the usually quiet village became lively. This girl's eyes are bright and I like her. Girl, what's your name? The iceman was gorgeously dressed, and his clothes were colorful and bright, making people wonder if he was wearing a flower pot. Ning Wanyue timidly said, My daughter's name is Wanyue. Wanyue? That's an elegant name. Who named it? The fat iceman asked. Before Ning Wanyue could answer, the fat auntie on the side answered. This name was given by the poor father of Wanyue. Since the establishment of the Jiang dynasty, the Empress opened the imperial examinations, and many young people dreamed of reaching the sky in one step. Ning Wanyue's father was one of them. Unfortunately, his talent was not high, and he could only read a few words in the past few years. Not long ago, he was bitten to death by a poisonous snake while working in the field. Wanyue's mother died early, and her father also passed away. The family was penniless, and now they were so poor that they couldn't even feed themselves. Knowing that a noble had come to the village to choose a girl as a child bride, Wanyue's aunt hurriedly brought the little burden out. The iceman asked again, Can you read? Wanyue timidly nodded. The iceman turned around and talked with the people accompanying him, and after a while, he decided on Wanyue. Aunt Wanyue happily pushed her out, and turned around to accept the betrothal gift from the iceman. The young and ignorant Wanyue followed the iceman into the carriage, her face full of bewilderment. She didn't know where her future would go with this carriage. Wanyue knew what a child bride was, and several families in the village had also bought a child bride. She thought that her husband was either an old man in his 30s or 40s, or a 3 or 4-year-old urchin. However, after a month, she was suddenly at a loss when she saw the handsome, tranquil young man. Such a good-looking immortal would actually worry about not being able to find a wife? Why did you send this child here? The voice was cold, like the tinkling of a clear spring, seeping with a chill. The plain-clothed young man sat under the porch with a zither on the table in front of him. A similarly plain white forehead cloth was neatly placed on his forehead, and 2 plain white belts were wrapped around his waist. It was a long morning attire. His eyes swept over Wanyue's face without a trace of emotion. With just a glance, Wanyue was so scared that she took 2 steps back, timidly hiding behind Iceman. The eldest lady said that Grand Tutor Wei should continue the bloodline. Iceman's voice was not as frivolous as before, but with a trace of indifference that was difficult for others to understand. In short, it was very imposing. Ha! The young man snorted coldly with a mocking smile on his face. Iceman pushed Wanyue out from behind him. If second Langjun is not willing, I will come back in half a year to take this child away. Iceman left, leaving only the moon and a few large and small bags, which contained a lot of gold and silver jewelry, and clothes of good materials. The young man continued to play the zither. Wanyua didn't understand what he was playing, but she thought it was beautiful. She stood under the porch and basked in the sun all afternoon, not knowing to find a shady place to hide from the sun. At dusk, the young man returned to the house with the zither in his arms, and came out after a while. "What is your name?" The young man handed her a glass of water. Wanyua took it and greedily drank a few mouthfuls, almost choking. "This little one's surname is Ning, and my maiden name is Wanyua." The young man sat under the porch, casually wearing a pair of crudely made wooden clogs. He looked at the petite Wanyua and asked, "How old are you?" 11. The young man murmured, "Only 11 years old. Ha, this is ridiculous." Wanyua didn't dare to move. Before Iceman came, he had repeatedly ordered her to follow all kinds of rules into her head. The young man said again, "Then do you know what they want you to do?" Wanyua said, "To be Longjuan's wife." She spoke very bluntly, her eyes dark and clear. After a while, a hand with distinct fingers appeared on Wanyu's head, rubbing her hair. "You're only 11 years old. If I were born 5 or 6 years earlier, you could be my daughter." Wanyua tilted her head and asked anxiously, "Then should I call you daddy?" The young man was speechless. Forget it, forget it. Why should I get angry with a child like you?" The young man sighed and said, "Just call me Big Brother." Wanyua asked, "Big Brother? Then can Wanyua still be your wife?" The young man laughed. "You're so young. What do you know about a wife?" Wanyua hung her head and twisted her sleeves, not daring to say another word. The young man lived deep in the mountains. It was a beautiful place with beautiful scenery. But for some reason, the young man was a vegetarian all year round, wearing plain clothes, as if he was observing mourning for someone. Wanyua lived in a house near the young man, and had nothing to do all day. She saw that the courtyard was empty, and felt that it was a waste to leave it empty. So she rolled up her sleeves and started weeding. The young man's daily routine was either playing the zither, or painting, or staring blankly at the sky. Seeing Wanyua like this, his interest was slowly aroused. "What are you doing?" "There's a lot of land outside. Once the weeds are cleared, we can plant cabbages. We'll be able to eat fresh vegetables in the future." The young man tucked his hands in his sleeves and said to Wanyua, "Someone will bring us fresh fruits and vegetables every day. There's no need to grow them ourselves." Wanyua gasped. The young man continued, "What else? Where do you think the food I've been eating these days came from?" Wanyua was even more confused. For the first time, she was extremely curious about the young man's identity. She lived here for a few days, and found that the young man's courtyard was very large. But inside and outside, there were only 2 living people, the 2 of them. "Do you think living here is very boring?" The young man carried a zither, and found a place to sit on the ground. He played a few times, and turned to look at Wanyua. "That's true. This place is very remote, and close to the Imperial Mausoleum. Ordinary people wouldn't dare to come close." Only then did Wanyua realize that they were actually living in the back mountains of the Imperial Mausoleum. It's not very boring. I can see Langjun every day. I feel like a whole day isn't enough." Wanyua was an honest child. She said whatever she wanted to say, straightforward and pure. "Can you read?" the young man asked her. "I can read a few words." The Empress set a precedent and set up girls' schools in various places. Not only did they teach women how to read, and calculate, but they were also taught self-defense techniques for 4 years. In the Jiang dynasty, if a woman wanted to marry well, or to become an independent woman, she had to choose a husband. The young man asked, "Do you want to continue learning? I can teach you, so that you don't have anything to do and waste your time." Wanyua nodded heavily, her eyes brightening. She loved to study, but due to a family accident, she only studied for 2 years before returning home. Wanyu's results in the girls' school were good, but compared to the young man beside her, she seemed to be nothing. Chapter 850. Wanyua entered the young man's study, and found that the large room was filled with bookshelves stacked with countless books. So many! Wan Yu's small mouth opened slightly and forgot to close it for a long time. My father's book collection. The young man's voice had a hint of a smile and a hint of pride. This was the first time Wan Yu heard the young man talk about his family. Unknowingly, Wan Yu had been here for half a year, and the deadline with the Iceman was approaching. Wan Yu was so anxious that she couldn't even concentrate on her daily studies, and was quickly seen through by the young man. If you don't like learning, then give it up. Why force yourself? Listening to Wan Yu's messy playing, the young man's face flashed with anger. Wan Yu hung her head, dispirited and stammering as she voiced out her worries. Just for this. The young man was surprised. Wan Yu said, "If Lang Jun doesn't like it, then the Iceman will send me back, and then I'll be sold by Auntie again." The young man sat by the zither table, not knowing what to think. "I'm afraid that for the rest of my life I'll be neighbors with the mausoleum, and never be able to leave." The young man sighed. "You're still young. I'll talk to that woman, and ask her to help you arrange a marriage. She's the most obedient lackey in the world, obeying the orders of the most powerful person in the world." Wan Yu didn't know why the young man wanted to live in seclusion near the mausoleum, but from the looks of it, he had his own reasons as well as external constraints. For more than half a year, the young man's largest area of activity was near the mausoleum, and he never spent the night outside, returning as soon as it was dark. But, what if Wan Yu covets Lang Jun's looks and no longer likes anyone else? The Jiang dynasty was open. It was common for women to confess their love to men. In the troubled times of 20 or 30 years ago, Wan Yu could have married at this age. "You're still young. In a few days you'll be 12. In a few years you'll be 18, not young." After rounding it up, she would be an adult. Wan Yu gathered her courage. She knew that there was no better person in the world than the young man in front of her. The young man was speechless. Facing Wan Yu, who was smaller than him, he didn't say anything. In his eyes, she was just a naive child. Wan Yu had lived with the young man in the back mountain of the mausoleum for nearly 6 years. In the blink of an eye, she had grown into a slender and elegant beauty. The young man still looked the same, except that his facial features were more mature. Time seemed to have stopped on him. One day, she went out to pick some fruits that she had planted. When she returned home, she found that there were many exquisite carriages and horses outside the courtyard. She nervously moved forward but was not stopped. Wan Yu saw the Iceman from several years ago. He was dressed in a green and white chrysanthemum dress, looking very capable and experienced. "Who are you?" Wan Yu asked anxiously. The other party also looked at her. After a while, he recognized her as the girl from many years ago. "The first lady is talking to the second Lang Jun inside. Let's wait here." Iceman nodded and smiled at her, which made Lan Yue even more nervous. The first lady inside, was that his family? It was strange. Since Wan Yu first met the young man, he had always been wearing plain clothes, a plain forehead cloth and a belt. He even avoided greasy food. If he was mourning for his family, he wouldn't have been mourning for 6 or 7 years, would he? Standing in the corridor, Wan Yu relied on her good hearing to faintly hear the conversation in the room. "After a few years, have you reflected on yourself?" The one who spoke was a woman. Her voice was slightly hoarse, but inexplicably carried a strong aura. The young man sneered. "What do I have to reflect on myself?" The woman said. "Even now, you still don't think you're wrong?" The young man pursed his lips and said nothing. Wan Yu's heart inexplicably tightened. Although she didn't know what happened to the young man's family, she had been with him for many years and often saw regret and frustration in his eyes. The young man's voice rose a few octaves. He said, "You think I'm wrong? Jiang Yin, you've had all the good things in the world. Why is it that even when I'm asking for an explanation, I'm being accused of treason? We're clearly siblings from the same mother. You're powerful, and I'm just the son of a concubine. You've been carefully taught by her, and I've been secretly ridiculed. Jiang Yin, how have I done worse than you? You were born a proud son of heaven. But when I was born, my identity was erased, and I was marked as a dead person. Has she ever asked me how I feel?" Wan Yu was frightened like a startled bird. She had known the young man for so many years, but when had she ever seen him so emotional? The woman in the room said calmly, "In the end, it's still hard for you to calm down. Yes, The young man said, I would rather accept the imperial edict and commit suicide in front of the palace than live out my days in this mausoleum's back mountain. The woman sighed. I thought that since you've lived here for so long, you should be able to calm down and reflect on the situation back then. The Grand Tutor has high hopes for you, and Mother has high expectations for you. But you only know how to throw a tantrum. Ask for an explanation? The price of asking for an explanation is simply too heavy. The young man didn't answer, but the sound of something heavy falling came from the room, as if someone had thrown something on the table to the ground. Jiang Yin, it's easy for you to say. She's never looked me in the eye, not even once. If he didn't know the truth, the young man could still muddle along. No matter what, he was the only son of the Grand Tutor of the current crown princess. Even though he was Teng Qie's bastard son, he could still live a happy life. However, the truth was cruel. He was actually the son of the emperor, and back then, he was posthumously conferred the title of Crown Prince Zhangzhua. Two identities, one earth, the other heaven. He couldn't calm down. Why did he have to be stripped of his identity at birth? Since he was to be despised and abandoned at birth, he might as well not have been born at all. They were of the same mother, but their treatment was so different. At that time, he was indeed naive and ignorant, deceived by others. He actually suspected that his biological father wasn't his biological father, but a villain who had secretly stolen the crown prince. He mistakenly thought his biological father was his enemy. Later, he found out that the person who had stripped him of his identity was none other than the sovereign of the 9 and 5. Before he could recover from such a huge truth, one blow after another came crashing down on him, causing him to see stars. His biological father insisted that he was impersonating Crown Prince Zhangzhua, and before he could refute, he pulled out his sword and committed suicide. When the young man received this news, his vision darkened. He felt as if the world had collapsed, and he couldn't hear anything else. His biological mother, who was said to have passed away, woke up again. Under the terrified gazes of the civil and military officials, she methodically cleaned up a bunch of rebels. Those who should be arrested were arrested, and those who should be killed were killed. Those who were arrogant and complacent not long ago were all sent to prison, but he, the mastermind, was left to the side, and he didn't even look at him. Even when his biological mother really passed away, due to a critical illness, he still didn't receive any word about his punishment. He was actually like a clown, ignored to this point. You didn't look at me properly? The woman smiled. So that's what you think. Then, do you want to hear what I have to say? Chapter 851. The woman said, You must have investigated the past since you're living here, right? Don't deny it. I know better than you what books are in the study. The world is unstable, and there are many contradictions in the court. Mother spends 14 to 16 hours a day busy with court affairs. You can follow the Grand Tutor into the palace and see her a few times a year. What about me? When you're tired of studying, you throw a tantrum and refuse to learn. The Grand Tutor patiently coaxes you, but what about me? I can only be accompanied by books, and I can't finish learning every day. In my spare time, I'm even taken to the common people to experience their situation. I've been a dock laborer, learned to beg on the streets, and hid in the countryside to investigate the people's situation. Wait, Song, can I hate you too? I don't even dare to fall sick. Other than the maids, no one is by my side. When you're slightly ill, the Grand Tutor stays up all night watching over you. Mother is so busy that she even grabs the imperial physician for questioning. Wait, Song, you live a relaxed and happy life. But have you ever thought about the suffering of others? Outside the room, Wanhua listened with worry. Mother also said before she passed away that she regretted letting you live too comfortably. That's why she had so much time to think. The Grand Tutor feels guilty for spoiling you too naively. Just a mere rumor can make you feel uneasy? Tell me, other than the throne, what do you have that makes you feel uneasy? The woman continued. Mother fought for the world. You're only her son, not her. She can give the world to whoever she wants. So what if you're her son? Must she leave the world to you? The youth couldn't bear it any longer. I never wanted the world. I only hoped that she would acknowledge me, that I could properly call her mother, and that I could be recorded in the genealogy. But everyone told me that I was only a disgrace to her. He was young and insensible, and he was used as a sharp knife to stab his loved one in the chest. How could he want this? He watched over the coffin for 12 years. Did she really think that he was an unfilial son and wasn't sad at all? You're recorded as a legitimate son in the Wei family genealogy, the woman said. In the genealogy, the legal wife next to the grand tutor is Lu Lanting. The youth didn't recover for a moment. Back then, mother only wanted to have one child. However, she was concerned about the grand tutor, so she took the risk to give birth to you. Her original intention was for you to accompany the grand tutor and inherit the Wei family. The woman suddenly said, in front of others, I can only call him grand tutor. I also want to properly call him father. The young man was speechless. Forget it. It's all history from more than a decade ago. I didn't come here today to talk nonsense with you. The woman said, it's about time for you and Ning Wanyue to get married. As your older sister, I should send you a congratulatory gift. If you and her descendants can be of great use, I will pardon them and allow them to enter the imperial court. If you think it through, send someone to let me know. If you haven't figured it out, you can continue to be the guardian. Before his mother passed away, she had left behind a posthumous edict that punished Wei Tsong to guard the coffin for 12 years. Now the time limit was up. This was the first time Ning Wanyue saw Wei Tsong's older sister, Jiang Yin, for the last time. Upon seeing the other party, Ning Wanyue hurriedly greeted him. The other party stood by her side and said, take good care of him for us. Don't spoil him too much. Ning Wanyue's eyes widened in fright. By the time she regained her senses, the other party had already left, leaving behind only countless betrothal gifts and dowry. Langjun, your older sister. The young man's face darkened. He was in a very bad mood as he plucked the zither from time to time. Call me Fusho. I want to hear someone call me that again. The young man had a name. His surname was Wei, and his given name was Kong. His courtesy name was Tingzhong. He was one of the people involved in the once sensational Crown Prince Zhang Zhua case. Fusho. She. Before Ning Wanyue could finish, the young man said hoarsely, she won't come again. You should also leave. You want to drive me away? Ning Wanyue tugged at her sleeves and bit her lower lip. That's right. How can my identity be worthy of you? How could she have imagined that the young man, who wore plain clothes all year round, was actually a member of the imperial family? Ning Wanyue was just a country girl. Even though she had studied with the young man for several years, she was still lacking something. To put it bluntly, she didn't look like a crown prince when she wore a dragon robe. The young man plucked the zither in silence. After a while he said, your life will be so boring if you follow me. Ning Wanyue said, I've lived here with you for 6 years. Have you ever heard me say that it's boring? The young man was distraught. He put the zither to the side. Shout for me again. Ning Wanyue had thought that there was no hope. After hearing his words, she hesitated and called out, Fusho. The young man said, when I was young, I made a huge mistake. Even though I guarded the coffin for 12 years, I still couldn't erase the wound in my heart. Ning Wanyue said, since you're so remorseful, why did you talk back to that lord just now? The young man didn't answer. He was afraid that if he admitted defeat, even the last family member, who was willing to pay attention to him, would ignore him. He had guarded the coffin here for 12 years, and had only seen his older sister twice in total. The first time was when he had just been sent to the back mountain of the imperial mausoleum. The second time was today. He was a commoner, while the other party was the emperor sitting on the dragon throne. If the other party didn't think of him, he wouldn't even be able to enter the imperial city, let alone see her. There are some things you don't understand. The young man hung his head, half of his face buried in the shadows. Ning Wanyue really didn't understand. The young man continued, she's still patient with me. I can beg her to bestow you a good marriage. No matter what, she was a student taught by the young man. In terms of talent and learning, few noble ladies in the imperial city could compare to Wanyue. If she had a good identity, she would definitely be rich for the rest of her life. Ning Wanyue was originally sad, but when she heard the young man's words, She suddenly laughed. The young man asked, "What are you laughing at?" Ning Wanyu said, "I just feel that there's still hope for me to stay by your side. If you don't care about me, why bother using the word beg? I've been with you for many years, but I've never seen you use such a word. Now that you're willing to use it for me, it shows that I still have some weight in your heart. Tell me, shouldn't I be happy for myself?" The young man was speechless. Ning Wanyu said, "I'm just a country girl, but now that I have the chance to tie the knot with you, I can't be more than happy." The young man looked at Ning Wanyu and faintly understood why Jiang Yan's confidant chose her and sent her to his side. "Fusho is your sister, really, Her Majesty?" Ning Wanyu rested her cheeks on her hands. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were sparkling. It was said that both empresses were wise rulers who loved the people like their own children, especially the current empress, who was honest and loved the people. When the empress ascended to the throne, she swore to follow her mother's example and never got married. Although she never got married, she gave birth to a daughter a few years ago. Her biological father's identity was still unknown. However, the people were more concerned about achievements and didn't pay much attention to the emperor's private life. When Ning Wanyu was young, she often heard her father talk about the achievements of the two emperors. Her father was born in troubled times, and he admired the two emperors the most. In her father's words, an emperor who could let the people live a good life was a good emperor. As for the disputes in the imperial court, they were too far away from the common people. Under her father's influence, Ning Wanyu was also a die-hard fan of the empress. The young man saw her blushing cheeks and thought of his biological sister's appearance, and he felt inexplicably suffocated. Ning Wanyu asked him, "Does Fusho still have to keep vigil here?" The young man said, "Mother, the former empress punished me to keep vigil for 12 years. At first, I wanted to leave at all times, but now I don't want to." Ning Wanyu asked doubtfully, "Because the knot in Fusho's heart hasn't been resolved? Or is it because the 12 years haven't passed? The time limit is up. Otherwise, why would Her Majesty condescend to come all the way here?" The young man spoke insincerely. He clearly looked forward to this day. He occasionally knew how busy this imperial sister was from the books in the market. She wasn't as leisurely as his mother back then, and it wasn't easy for her to take the time to make such a trip. "I just don't want to leave." Ning Wanyu said, "Why?" "I'm afraid you don't know. If I hadn't been too stupid back then and made a huge mistake, how could the former empress have died so early?" Ning Wanyu somewhat disagreed. She said, "But I only heard father mention that the former empress's health wasn't very good, and she had the intention of abdicating the throne back then. I think, with the former empress's temperament of being responsible for the people, she wouldn't have easily abandoned her heavy burden and let Her Majesty succeed the throne unless it was something beyond her control, right? Perhaps the former empress's health really wasn't good back then, and she wanted to abdicate the throne." What she said next might touch the young man's sore spot, so Ning Wanyu didn't dare to continue. The young man said, "Just continue." Ning Wanyu scratched her head and said, I'm thinking, maybe the former empress's condition wasn't good back then, so she wanted to unload her burden and take a good look at her empire? The former empress sacrificed most of her life to end the chaotic era. It would be a pity if she didn't take a good look at her empire. The young man looked at Ning Wanyu silently. "Since your period of vigil is up, why don't you walk around and take a look at the former empress? Your painting skills are excellent. You can draw it." Ning Wanyu originally wanted to persuade the young man to let go of the knot in his heart, but when she saw his slightly red eyes, she didn't know how to continue. "Let me lean on you. I'll be fine in a while." The young man leaned on her shoulder and didn't say anything for a long time. Night fell outside. The young man restrained his emotions and got up to open the boxes placed in the corner of the study. There were a total of 16 boxes, and they were neatly stacked. Ning Wanyu had never seen him open any of the boxes in the past few years. "These are my father's brushes and ink." The young man opened the boxes one by one. Ning Wanyu could still smell the fragrance of the ink on them. After they were unfolded, a magnificent scene appeared in front of her eyes. She finally knew where the young man learned his exquisite painting skills from. He rarely painted people. Most of his paintings were landscape paintings. When I looked at his paintings in the past, I always felt that he had a knot in his heart. Now that I look at it again, I realize how shallow I am. Ning Wanhua finally understood that these boxes contained the belongings of the young man's father. They were all books, poems, and paintings. Apart from a few land deeds, there were no other yellow or white objects. The cool breeze never stops, the fragrance of flowers fills the path, and the red clouds ripple for thousands of miles. The painting depicted a lotus in full bloom. The lotus leaves seemed to sway with the wind, and one could faintly smell a sweet fragrance. A graceful figure stood in the pavilion in the middle of the lake. She seemed to be looking at the person in the painting with a smile. Chapter 852. It was late spring in March, and the grass was long and the birds were flying. It was supposed to be a time of prosperity, but no one was enjoying the scenery. Shiba Songzhou. Songzhou was originally one of the 33 counties in the 10 states of Zhongzhou. After the fall of Zhongzhou, there were endless disputes among the feudal lords. Songzhou had changed hands several times, and now it had a new master. Shiba was the largest city in Songzhou. At this time, the flames of war had just subsided, but inside and outside the city, there was still fear. Even the commoners could feel the tension in the air. There were a few commoners sitting in the tea house. They whispered to each other and spoke in a low voice, as if afraid of being heard by a third person. "Hey, have you heard? Our current one." The man in coarse gray hemp pointed to the top of his head, with some fear and disgust on his face. "Turns out to be from the Liu family of Hejing County. But didn't I hear that she started out as a bandit? The Liu family of Hejian? Never heard of it. The original gentry clan in Dongqing. Actually, they are not big families here, but at least they are stronger than bandits." As the two were whispering, there was a sneer from the side. They all looked over and saw that the person who spoke was a rough man. Judging by his clothes, he was also an ordinary person. "Your information is already outdated." The man drank the coarse tea and narrowed his eyes. There was a hint of mockery on his face as he said to the two. The original defending general pushed the old man's father to the wall and forced him to retreat. What do you think the old man did? She actually said that she was born and raised by heaven and killed her old father in front of the battle. TSK. She died a quick death. When the people in the tea house heard this, they were so shocked that they looked around, afraid that there would be soldiers outside rushing in to arrest them. However, they were really curious and pestered the strong man to ask for details. The strong man was reserved for a while, then smiled and revealed the information he knew. The person he mentioned was the new master of Shiba, one of the feudal lords of the world, the Jiang family. As for her killing her father in front of the battle, it was even more interesting. The Jiang family's troops besieged Shiba for more than 2 months. The two sides fought several times, and Shiba's disadvantage became more and more obvious. Seeing that the city was about to be breached, the nobles in Shiba became more and more anxious. They'd heard of the rumors of the Jiang clan plundering like locusts. If the city was breached, then their savings would be lost. Many nobles chose to flee in secret. Only one family didn't leave. Instead, when they were drunk, they proudly claimed that they were the biological father of the lord of the Jiang clan outside the city. This was terrible. That person was captured by the city guards and used to threaten the Jiang clan's troops outside the city to retreat. The person who was taken away was none other than Lu Shi. Lu Shi was originally from Hejing County in Dongqing. A few years ago, Dongqing was destroyed and plunged into the flames of war. The second branch of the Liu family in Hejing County took all their wealth and fled to Zhongzhou to seek refuge. Coincidentally, he was in Songzhou. Some listeners didn't believe it. Maybe it was Lu Shi in disguise? The brawny man smiled and said, "Lu Shi is the biological father of the Jiang family. Everyone in Dongqing knew about this. Madame Jiang used to be a bandit in Dongqing. Later on, she caused a ruckus, and the imperial court sent her to Hu County. When she was conferred an official position, the father and daughter quarreled. Lu Shi even revealed another incident. It turns out that this bloodthirsty evil girl killed Lu Shi's only son. First she killed her own brother. Now she killed her father. This vicious woman was nothing more than this. No wonder. I always felt that the atmosphere these 2 days was strange. It was because of this. The people in the tea house were all denouncing her, but no one dared to raise their voice. After all, this was someone else's matter. Why should they sacrifice their lives for the sake of justice? At this moment, a troop of nearly 1,000 soldiers escorted a number of carriages into the city. The carriages were filled with sobbing sounds. The leader of the group was a woman with a pale face. Her hair was messy, and her wrinkled face was dull. Her eyes were sunken. Outside, a burly general in armor rode a tall horse. He held a horsewhip in his right hand and walked in front of the troops. Not long after, a young general in white and silver armor galloped over on a horse. He was holding a long silver spear in his hand. General Fu, Han Mei is here. How is the Lord? General Fu Wang came to his senses and hurried forward to welcome him. She's fine. It's just that the Lord doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Fu Wang snorted and sneered. Those literati only know how to cause trouble. Li Yin tightened his grip on the reins and did not reply. Fu Wang secretly patted Li Yin's arm and said in a low voice, "Don't worry. The Lord has military power in her hands. They won't be able to cause trouble. Besides, we don't even know if that Lu something is the Lord's biological father. He's not fit to rely on the Lord." The literati had failed to rebel for 3 years. What was there to be afraid of? A bunch of old men who only knew how to kill her father in front of the battlefield and scolded the Lord for being cruel and tyrannical? How many soldiers had been sacrificed to besiege Songzhou? Victory was at hand. Halfway through, a father had appeared and forced them to retreat and give up the territory they had previously conquered. Haha, how is that possible? If the Lord was worthy of her biological father and retreated, would she be worthy of the soldiers who had died in battle? Fu Wang did not expect his Lord to be so decisive. She killed without hesitation. The two of them escorted the dozens of women in the carriage into the city to see Jiang Pingji. These women could prove that the Lord was not Lu Shi's biological daughter. As long as this relationship was denied, there was naturally no crime of kill her father in front of the battlefield. Raise your head. The cold voice was a little hoarse, adding a bit of magnetism. At first glance, it did not sound like a woman's voice. Guzhen knelt down shakily. When she heard the voice, she suppressed her fear and raised her head slightly, but she did not dare to look directly at the woman sitting at the head of the table. Who would have thought that the person who was regarded as a disgrace by the Lu family and humiliated by Lu Shi would one day become the most powerful feudal lord in the world? Lady Guzhen, I invited you here to ask you some questions. Jiang Pingji, who was sitting at the head of the table, was about 27 or 28 years old. She had an imposing manner and was dignified without being angry. Guzhen was Lu Shi's legal wife. Unfortunately, she was old and frail, so Lu Shi never doted on her. The second branch of the Lu family fled to Songzhou to dominate. Lu Shi's lust was aroused again. He took in dozens of beautiful concubines and allowed his beloved concubines to humiliate his wife. Guzhen aged extremely quickly. Her hair was gray, and she looked like a lamp that had run out of oil. Go ahead and ask Lord Jiang. Guzhen's back was curled up. Her body was hunched, and she looked particularly pitiful. You and I both know that although I'm registered under your name, I'm not your daughter. Jiang Pingji went straight to the point. Guzhen's face turned pale when she heard this. Jiang Pingji seemed to not see her reaction and said coldly, My real birth mother, whose name is Gu Min, died from dystocia when she gave birth to me. After you were widowed for less than 2 years, you married Lu Shi with me. Am I right? Guzhen was the illegitimate daughter of the Gu family in Langjia. She was very inconspicuous. Gu Min was the legitimate daughter of the Gu family. Unfortunately, she was born with dementia and had never married in her life. Chapter 853. Lu Shi accidentally saw Gu Min's beauty and was shocked. He took advantage of her stupidity and found an opportunity to humiliate her and make her pregnant. By the time everyone noticed the abnormality, She was already 6 months pregnant. Guzhen had known about this a long time ago. She had been helping to cover it up and tolerating it. When the truth came out, she would stand up and be willing to bear the stigma of being pregnant out of wedlock. She would protect Gu Min's reputation and marry Lu Shi with the child. She had taken all the benefits, and poor Gu Min had died of a hemorrhage. Hearing Jiang Pingji talk about the past, Guzhen could not stop trembling. Jiang Pingji asked again, "Why? Are you feeling uneasy now that you've been exposed?" Guzhen trembled even more violently. Jiang Pingji said, "I don't want anything else today. I just want you to admit one thing." Guzhen looked up, as if she had seen a glimmer of hope. "You admit that you had an illicit affair with another man, and that you gave the child's father to Lu Shi." Guzhen's expression became conflicted and strange. Jiang Pingji said, "I would rather bear the title of an illegitimate child than have anything to do with a disgusting person like Lu Shi." As for her real birth mother, Gu Min, Jiang Pingji did not want her to have a bad reputation. That was good enough. Gu Dai held back her trembling and tightened her jaw muscles. She said, "Others won't believe it. It doesn't matter if others believe it or not. What's important is that there's such a saying." Jiang Pingji smiled. "If you do well, I'll guarantee that you'll have a comfortable life in your old age. If you don't know what's good for you, I can find other witnesses. I even killed Lu Shi, let alone you." Even though many years had passed, she still remembered how Widow Zhao of the Zhao family village in Hejian County had died. Guzhen was so scared that her face turned pale. She answered while trembling. With this official and unofficial history, had a lot more material for people to talk about. The official history stated that the father of the Empress was Lu Shi from Hejian County, but the unofficial history stated that it was someone else. This was because Guzhen had personally admitted that she had an affair with someone else, yet she refused to say who the man was. This caused people's imagination to run wild. Therefore, the mystery of the Empress's birth became a hot topic for scholars of later generations. The royal family turned a blind eye, allowing them to talk about their ancestors. It was fine as long as these scholars didn't cause too much trouble. With this, the storm of killing one's father on the battlefield barely subsided. However, that was not the only thing that worried Jiang Pingji. Huang Song, who was the most competitive, had already committed suicide. The Nye family was only left with the remnants of their troops and defeated generals. Now there were only 3 feudal families left in the world. Jiang Pingji single-handedly defeated the other 2. If there were no accidents, the world would be unified within 5 years. This was the consensus of everyone. This was a good thing. But Jiang Pingji's subordinates were not happy. Their lord was now 29 years old, and still had no children. How could they not be worried? Without an heir, even if the dynasty was unified, its inheritance would be severed after a few decades, and the world would fall into chaos. Without an heir, he would always feel anxious. In short, Jiang Pingji was being urged to get married. Not only were the strategists sighing, but many of the trusted generals were also hesitant to speak. The eunuch is more anxious than the emperor. If the lord was a man, they only needed to send a beauty. If this woman couldn't give birth, they could just change to another one. However, the lord was a woman, and giving birth required the lord to do it personally. This was a pain in the ass. They couldn't even persuade the other party to pamper their harem, because the lord did not have a backyard. This matter is not urgent. Jiang Pingji smiled as she drank. Sitting next to her was her drinking buddy, Feng Zhen. The two of them often colluded with each other. Their figures shuttled back and forth between various taverns, tea houses, and brothels. She's only 29 now. What's the rush? Feng Zhen choked on the fragrant wine in his mouth. 29 years old and she was not anxious? Did she have to wait until she was 39 before she started worrying? The lord became a bandit at the age of 12. She joined the army at the age of 16. She traveled from south to north. Now at the age of 29, she only had such a foundation. How could there be so many years for her to squander? She was urged to get married by her subordinates in various ways. No matter how much Jiang Pingji didn't care, she could only think about this matter. Qiguan Rang said, "With the Lord's power, you can secretly choose someone who is good in all aspects. When the time comes, you can get rid of the father and keep the child. Wouldn't that work? Jiang Pingji glanced at Qiguan Rang and asked him with her eyes, "How can you think of such a bad idea?" Qiguan Rang returned a cold look. "Why don't you think of a good idea yourself?" Jiang Pingji sighed again. "I'd rather have nothing than have something shoddy. If it's not the best and most suitable, I don't want anything else." Qiguan Rang's face remained cold. His children would be able to get married in a few years, but the Lord was still single. Seeing that the great undertaking of unifying the world was about to enter the final stage, there was no movement from Jiang Pingji. The wind of urging people to get married had blown to Wei Ci. Even an invisible person like him knew about this matter. It was obvious how anxious everyone was. Wei Ci had been keeping a low profile for the past 2 years, but his performance in the Battle of Songzhou was quite eye-catching. If there were no accidents, he would definitely be put in an important position. Although unifying the world was imminent, there were still many battles to be fought. If Wei Ci could seize the opportunity, he would not have to worry about fame and fortune. He eavesdropped on Han Yu for a while and secretly noted this matter down. One day, when she was dealing with documents, Jiang Pingji pulled her to talk about business for a while. They also chatted about many trivial matters. Wei Ci took the opportunity to mention the matter of the heir. He spoke more tactfully than others, but the core meaning was still the same. Jiang Pingji was stunned for a moment. Her eyes inexplicably became a little sharper. She asked calmly, "What do you think, Zixiao?" Wei Ci tried to figure out Jiang Pingji's thoughts. He felt that she was afraid of having a husband to divide the power. So he made the same suggestion as Qiguan Rang. Get rid of the father and keep the child. Anyway, it was the Lord who gave birth to the child. The child would be the Lord's bloodline. As for who the father was, it was not important. Jiang Pingji laughed. The smile on her face was disturbing. Is it really not important who the father is? Wei Ci did not understand. He was stunned for 2 seconds, but he still nodded. As long as it was the Lord's child, it was bound to be the future heir. Was it important who the husband was? However, when he thought of the person he admired giving birth to children with others, he felt vaguely like a fishbone stuck in his throat. His Lord was still suitable to be enshrined on the altar. It was not only him. Perhaps everyone else thought so. After a few days, Jiang Pingji seemed to be annoyed by the urging to get married. She was finally willing to compromise. She said to Wei Ci in private, "This is my personal matter. It's not good to trouble others." Wei Ci did not respond for a moment. There was a problem with his Lord's logic. He also belonged to the category of others. However, he more or less knew his Lord's temperament. There were some points that he really could not criticize. Jiang Pingji said again. "Anyway, they just want a young lord to feel at ease. Then I'll go along with their wishes. As long as a man is not a castrated eunuch, he can make a woman pregnant if he's healthy. I don't want to be picky. You can make arrangements according to my orders." Wei Ci was stunned. He did not expect his Lord to be so casual. There's no time like the present. Let's choose today. Jiang Pingji smiled and squinted her eyes. She leaned sideways on the table and said as if it had nothing to do with her. "After the 3rd watch today, the first man to pass by the back door of my manor will be the biological father of the next young lord." Wei Ci was so shocked that he was speechless. However, thinking about this style, it was indeed like his Lord's temperament. The fewer people who knew the identity of his Lord's biological father, the better. His Lord chose him to do this because she trusted him. Wei Ci could only bow his head and agree. The day and night were quite torturous. The strange feeling of having a fishbone stuck in his throat became more and more agitated as time went by. Hearing the sound of the 3rd watch, Wei Ci was shocked. Under Jiang Pingji's gaze, he got up and went to check. There were female guards guarding the front and back doors of Jiang Pingji's manor. He opened the door and took a look. There was not even a male kitten or puppy, let alone a shadow of a man. Wei Ci turned around and reported, "Jiang Pingji, the person involved, was not anxious at all. Come Zixiao, sit down. Let's have a drink together." Jiang Pingji pointed to the chair opposite the table. Wei Ci could hold his liquor well, but he was unwilling to drink in front of Jiang Pingji. He was always afraid that he would lose his composure after drinking and offend her. Jiang Pingji smiled and asked about Wei Si's family situation. She already knew about it, but hearing it from him personally made her feel different. After almost an hour, Wei Si got up again. It was still quiet outside, and there was not a single person. What was going on today? Did all the night owls go home to sleep? Wei Si was puzzled. When he saw the faint smile on Jiang Pingji's face, he suddenly saw the light. There were no more night owls. It was obvious that his lord was unwilling and had sent people to clear the place. If my lord is unwilling, why do you have to tease me? Jiang Pingji said. When did I tease you? Wei Si said. There is no one at night. Didn't my lord send people to guard all the main roads and seal off this road? Jiang Pingji said. Who said there is no one? Wei Si opened his eyes slightly in shock. Wait, something was not right. Is the person in front of me not a person? Wei Si listened and looked around. He did not see any traces of a third person. His heart sank. The person that his lord was referring to could not be himself, right? My lord. Since Zixiao also said that it is not important who the father of the child is, why are you stingy for one night? Jiang Pingji got up and came to Wei Si's side. She looked down at his pale face from above and sat beside him. A gentleman's word is as good as a fast horse's whip. I said that I want to choose a man who appears at the back door after midnight tonight. But today, there is no one else but Zixiao. Wei Si bowed to ask for forgiveness and said, I know that I am lowly and dare not blaspheme the holy body. Jiang Pingji laughed angrily. You dare not blaspheme? Why don't you think that it is blasphemy when I casually said that I want to choose any man who appears at the back door? Whether that person is beautiful or ugly, good or bad, healthy or sick, you don't know anything. Isn't this blasphemy? Wei Si crouched on the ground. He seemed to have 1,000 words in his mouth, but now they were stuck in his throat. He could not say a word. Jiang Pingji half squatted and raised her hand to pinch his lower jaw, forcing the two to look at each other. I have thought about it. Zixiao is the best. He has no family to implicate and is my loyal subject. I can be at ease. Wei Si said after a while. I am old and weak. I am unable to serve my lord, Jiang Pingji said. You are only 6 or 7 years older than me. She changed the action of pinching his lower jaw to caress his cheek. Her palm touched a hot patch, and she pressed it against the floor beside the table. Tonight, will you obey me? Chapter 854. Cheng Jing felt that the past few days were probably the most torturous and full of ups and downs for him. When he heard that Jiang Pingji asked him to go back, he felt as if he had been pardoned. He secretly wiped the cold sweat off his face, bowed and retreated. Looking at the blazing fire in the distance, Cheng Jing's fear of Jiang Pingji deepened. Who exactly was this person? He was actually able to kill that kind of demon over and over again. Most importantly, would that monster rise from the ashes and descend upon the world once more? Cheng Jing did not know any of these things. He sat in the carriage and prepared to return to the place where he was staying. There was a hurried sound of horse hooves in front of him. His coachman had to give way. Why was there someone galloping on a horse on the street at this time? Cheng Jing lifted the curtain of the carriage and saw that the person riding on the horse looked very familiar. He could not help but call out, Zixiao. The night was too dark. He only felt that the figure was very familiar. He could not see the side of the face clearly, so he was not sure if it was Wei Si. Cheng Jing and Wei Si were both disciples of Master Yuanjing. They were not only brothers, but also close friends who appreciated each other's talents. However, there were no convenient communication tools in this era. There was no internet or video chat. They could only rely on letters that were not safe and efficient. Speaking of which, Cheng Jing and Wei Si had not seen each other for almost 3 or 4 years. How could he not be surprised that they could meet again? If not, how could meeting an old friend in a foreign land be one of the 4 happy events in life? The man on the horse heard someone calling him and hurriedly pulled the reins. Following the voice, wasn't that Wei Si's face? Yumo. Wei Si was also pleasantly surprised. He did not expect to see his old friend here. It was a pity that it was not the time for old friends to catch up. He hurried over from Shangjing because he had an urgent matter to attend to. He could only postpone the reunion. Cheng Jing could also see that Wei Ci was covered in dust. He had probably suffered a lot. He said with understanding, "I'm still in Xiangyang these few days. There's no hurry to catch up. Zixiao, go and do your work first." Wei Ci bowed while riding on the horse. He waved the whip again and rushed towards the district headquarters. Cheng Jing was surprised. He did not know what happened to make Wei Ci in such a hurry. Jiang Pingji had the same question. She had just sent someone to deal with the corpse of the time traveler when Wei Ci asked to see her. Isn't Zixiao building the provincial government in Shangjing? The weather was still hot, and they had to travel back and forth. Wei Ci's body was weak. What if he fell ill? Quickly let them in and prepare some food to warm their stomachs. Zixiao has been traveling all the way. I'm afraid he won't have time to have a good meal. Jiang Pingji ordered someone to prepare supper in the small kitchen. Just then, Wei Ci came in from outside, his face still covered with some dust stains. "Greetings, my lord." Wei Ci saluted. Jiang Pingji asked him to stand up. "What happened in Shangjing? Why did you suddenly come back?" Calculating the time, Wei Ci should have stayed in Shangjing for a month before returning. Could it be that something went wrong during the construction of the prefecture? Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Ci's face and saw that he was calm. It seemed like it was not a bad thing. As expected, Wei Ci took out a few pieces of rolled-up paper from the bamboo tube hanging on his waist. "There are some things that are difficult to decide, so I hurried back to hand them over to my lord to make a decision." Although Jiang Pingji had given the authority to rebuild Shangjing to Wei Ci and Zhang Ping, they had a sense of propriety and still had to consult her on some matters. Jiang Pingji said as she took the paper, "Your body has yet to recover. If there's anything urgent, you can just send someone to pass it to me. Why do you have to personally make a trip? The weather is still hot, and you can't stand the heat. What if you fall ill on the way?" Wei Ci heard this and lowered his head slightly. He did not dare to look up at her, but his ears were very hot, and it made him feel uncomfortable. Jiang Pingji did not care about Wei Ci's reaction. Instead, she carefully looked at the things that Wei Ci had brought. There were many miscellaneous things inside, but there were two things that were the most important. One was Jishan outside Shangjing. Jishan had many hot springs, which was a gift from the heavens. During the earthquake in Shangjing, Jishan's hot springs were destroyed on a large scale. The spring's mouth changed greatly. Wei Ci wanted to take advantage of the reconstruction and reorganize the area around Jishan. He could not let it go to waste. Of course, Zhang Ping disagreed with him. In Zhang Ping's inherent impression, hot springs were something that only the rich and powerful had the right to enjoy. It was a symbol of extravagance. Now that even Shangjing had not been rebuilt, why should they allocate manpower to Jishan's hot springs? Wouldn't it be a waste? Jiang Pingji asked Wei Ci. "What do you think, Zixiao?" Wei Ci said, "I have a different opinion from Shiheng. If possible, I hope to rebuild Jishan." The damage to Jishan's hot springs was not very great. If they waited for a few decades to come back and cause trouble, they did not know if it could be salvaged. Jiang Pingji looked at the letter that Zhang Ping asked Wei Ci to bring along. It contained the reasons for his objection. Zhang Ping did not say that rebuilding the hot springs was just for enjoyment. He just felt that the cost would be too high. Jiang Pingji asked, "Is there any reason?" Wei Ci also knew that if he caused trouble, it would increase the reconstruction budget. He felt a little awkward. He said, "Has my lord thought of staying in Shangjing for a long time in the future?" Jiang Pingji said, "There has been an earthquake in Shangjing. It might not happen again for hundreds of years. Maybe it will happen every few days. No one can predict what will happen in the sky. No one would feel at ease living in this place. If there is further development in the future, we will naturally have to find another place." Based on the earthquake that had happened in Shangjing, if she wanted to unify the world in the future, she would not consider setting the capital here. Wei Ci said, "I have looked carefully. In Shangjing, other than the hot springs and the capital, there is no other outstanding place. Shangjing was no longer the capital, and it would not be the capital in the future. What special feature would it have? There had been an earthquake here. If there were no other means, Perhaps this place would not prosper in 100 years. If Jishan's hot springs could be preserved, it would at least be a special feature. Jiang Pengji understood what Wei Ci wanted to express. After a moment of silence, she said, "Let's do as you say." Wei Ci's body trembled, and he bowed to thank her. He was not a stupid person. If he still did not understand, he was afraid that he was really stupid. His lord seemed to be especially indulgent towards him under the premise that it did not violate her principles. Wei Ci was very flustered. There was some indescribable joy, but also some indescribable fear. He did not know how to respond, so he could only choose to remain silent. Other than the matter of Jishan's hot springs, there was another matter that needed Jiang Pengji's approval. This matter could not be said to be big, but it was not small either. Building a reservoir? Jiang Pengji asked. Whose idea was it? Wei Ci said. This was Chongming and Xi's idea. Xiao Guang was inspired by the reservoir in Xiangyang district. He felt that if he could use the terrain to build a reservoir, once it was completed, Xiangyang County would benefit a lot. As long as it was not a particularly serious drought, this place could survive. It was just that the project was too big, and he felt that he could not handle it. Chapter 855. Looking at the blueprint, the size of the reservoir isn't big. Xiao Guang was indeed a disciple of Moism, who specialized in water conservancy. The location he chose was excellent, and it seemed like he had done some careful planning. He chose a pocket-shaped basin. The terrain was deep, the reservoir capacity was large, and the water collection area was considerable. There was a natural dam in that area. They only needed to dig out the reservoir and dig a man-made river that was about 100 miles long to divert the water from Dongqing's mother river into the reservoir. The scale is indeed small, but if it's completed, the people of Xiangyang County will not have to worry about drought. Jiang Pengji did not agree easily this time. Instead, she frowned and calculated the pros and cons. There were no explosives or advanced siege weapons. They could only rely on manpower. The difficulty of building the reservoir was not small. Money was not a problem, the key was the lack of manpower. This matter, let's put it aside for now, Jiang Pengji said. We'll talk about it after we conquer the northern borderline and have enough manpower. Wei Ci's heart was still heavy with the first sentence, but he could no longer hide the smile on his lips when he heard the second sentence. Jiang Pengji said, The kitchen has already prepared supper. Go and have some first to avoid hurting your stomach. Wei Ci's ears turned red again. He bowed his head and thanked her for her kindness. Jiang Pengji suddenly asked, It's already dark. Zixiao, do you want to stay the night? Wei Ci's hands trembled, and the porcelain bowl in his left hand almost fell on the table. Without waiting for him to react further, she said, The guest room has been empty. If you stay, it will save you the trouble of running around. Wei Ci relaxed and tactfully declined Jiang Pengji's good intentions. After all, he was an outsider. If he stayed the night, it would be bad for the Lord's reputation. Wei Ci had a simple meal and hurriedly got up to leave, as if there was a terrifying beast chasing after him. Jiang Pengji thoughtfully pinched her chin and looked at Wei Ci's receding figure in deep thought. Is the advice from that group of unreliable people really useful? Can a frog be cooked in warm water? She muttered to herself. Her weak voice was blown away by the night wind. The next day Wei Ci woke up early. Although he had rushed back from Shangjing, he still made a trip to the government office out of habit. Just as he arrived at the government office, Li Yin ran towards him. He looked very nervous, as if something big had happened. Wei Ci did not react in time, and was almost hit by Li Yin. Fortunately, Li Yin had good reflexes, and managed to stop the car in time. Otherwise, based on Wei Ci's physical fitness, he would have been sent flying by Li Yin. Wei Ci said with lingering fear, Han Mei, the government office is not allowed to travel quickly. What if we startle the Lord? Li Yin knew he had made a mistake, and hurriedly apologized to Wei Ci. Without waiting for Wei Ci's reply, he wanted to leave in a hurry. Han Mei. Wei Ci was shocked and guessed that something big had happened to Li Yin. Otherwise, why would he be in such a state? Li Yin said in a panic. I heard that a poisonous snake sneaked into the stables and scared Whitey. stable? A venomous snake sneaked in? Wei Xi was stunned. For a moment, he did not understand the precise meaning of these words. A poisonous snake had sneaked into the stable. Why was Li Yun so flustered? Could it be that his beloved horse had been bitten by a poisonous snake? However, White seemed to be the Lord's mount. If anyone were to panic, it should be the Lord who panicked. How could it be Li Yun's turn? Prompted by his curiosity, Wei Xi followed and questioned Li Yun as he walked. After asking in detail, he found out that the foal in White's residence had already been promised to Li Yun by the Lord. Li Yun had been looking forward to the birth of the foal for a few months. In a month's time, White would be due to give birth. He did not expect something like this to happen at the last minute. The poisonous snake had been caught, and the horses in the stable were not injured. However, White was frightened and seemed to be going into premature labor. It was not easy for a premature foal to survive. If it encountered a troublesome mare, its chances of survival would be even slimmer. Li Yun had been looking forward to the foal for so long. When he heard the news, he was so anxious that he almost cried. White and Little White lived in the same stable. However, in order to take care of the pregnant White who was about to give birth, Little White was sent to another place by the stableman. Little White seemed to be aware of White's situation and was very anxious. Unlike its usual meek and bashful self, it kept kicking the ground with its hooves, trying to break through the fence. After all, it was a warhorse that had followed the Lord to the battlefield. When Little White became fierce, the stableman's legs trembled in front of it. Seeing Li Yun coming over, the stableman who was taking care of the two horses was excited, as if he had seen his savior. Although the stable was kept very clean, there was still a strange smell. Li Yun often dealt with horses, so he did not care about the smell. Wei Xi's expression did not change either. Inside the stable, White was lying on its side on the ground covered with soft hay. Its belly was huge, and it was in low spirits. It looked very uneasy. Seeing a stranger coming over, White kept whining and seemed to want to stand up, but after trying for a long time, it could only lie down. Wei Xi said, "What's the use of calling Field Officer Li over when the mare is giving birth?" Instead of preparing to help White, he came to find the ignorant Li Yun. If this was delayed, it would be a tragedy and 2 lives. The stableman was so anxious that he wanted to cry. It was not that he did not want to help White, but it was clear that White and Little White were too fierce, and he could not get close. Since the Lord was not around, he could only find Li Yun. No matter what, he had to comfort the mare first. Wei Xi observed for a while, and saw the dilemma of the stableman. He could not help but frown. "Han Mei, go and pull Little White away. Don't let it cause trouble here." Wei Xi asked the stableman to fetch the bridle. He tied it up neatly and fixed the wide sleeves, revealing 2 slender and fair arms. Animals were different from humans. Communication was a problem for both. Fortunately, Little White was intelligent. Facing Li Yun, it could still manage to calm down. If it was the stableman, how could he suppress it? White should be injured somewhere. "I'm afraid it can't stand up. It looks like it's its first time. Without external help, I'm afraid it can't be born." Wei Xi then asked the stableman to fetch some hot water and scissors. Just as he was about to enter the stable where White was, the stableman was scared out of his wits. White was extremely aggressive. Would Wei Xi be able to come out alive if he entered? The stableman could not stop it. He could only close his eyes in despair, afraid that White would bite Wei Xi to death. The result was unexpected. The originally aggressive White was exceptionally docile in front of Wei Xi. It would even rub against his arm from time to time. The stableman muttered, "Isn't this the Lord's horse? Why was it so close to Wei Xi? Bear with it. Otherwise the child won't be born." Wei Xi stroked White's mane. He did not find it dirty. He knelt on the ground covered with straw and washed his hands with warm water. He then cleaned the horse's mane. Li Yun felt as if his 3 views had been shattered. He carefully lay on the ground outside the fence and stared at Wei Xi's movements without blinking. "Wait, Zixiao, you know how to deliver babies?" Wei Xi did not answer. He only reached his hand inside and carefully felt the position of the foal, helping it to adjust its position. Not only did he know how to deliver babies, But he also earnestly consulted many midwives. He was very experienced. Chapter 856. Lian clenched his teeth nervously, as if his wife was waiting to give birth inside. Zixiao, does this hurt? Looking at Wei Si's actions, Lian inhaled sharply from time to time. His expression was unusually rich. There was no trace of the cold and fierce general. The stableman felt that he had lived for a long time. A strategist who knew how to deliver a horse, and a general who became silly and sweet in an instant, suddenly felt very down to earth. Wei Si turned his head and said to Lian, "Go to the side. Don't make a ruckus here." Although White was very intelligent, the Maras that gave birth were unreasonable. The surrounding environment was too noisy, which was not conducive to the birth. Lian was scolded. He hurriedly covered his mouth with both hands, his pair of black eyes filled with silent grievance. Wei Si's expression was somewhat solemn. If it was another month, the foal in White's belly would automatically adjust its position, but when he touched the position just now, he realized that the foal's position was not quite right. If that was the case, no matter how hard White tried, the foal could not be pushed out of the birth canal. "Bear with it, it will be fine in a while." Wei Si comforted White's emotions in a gentle voice. It kept whining and became more and more anxious, its ponytail swaying non-stop. Not long after, Jiang Pingji also received the news and hurriedly rushed over. Before she arrived, she could already hear White's whimpering in her ears. "White!" she called out, and Dabai responded with a whimper upon hearing a familiar voice. Jiang Pingji pushed away Liyun, who was blocking the fence, and happened to see Wei Si kneeling on the ground with his arms crossed, his clothes stained. Wei Si had always liked cleanliness. Jiang Pingji did not expect him to disregard the filth and personally deliver a horse. "Zixiao." Jiang Pingji entered the stable. Wei Si heard the movement and said without lifting his head, "Lord, help to stabilize White." As the pain intensified, White might not recognize him. When the time came, the situation would be even worse. "Oh, okay." Jiang Pingji stayed near Wei Si. White stretched out its head and rubbed against her hand, as if complaining about its grievance. With Jiang Pingji around, White's emotions were obviously much calmer. Wei Si was relieved. This was Dabai's first time as a mother, so she didn't have enough experience, so giving birth was going to be a little difficult for her. Wei Si concentrated on delivering the baby. Hot sweat broke out on his forehead and flowed down his cheeks to his neck, burying into his collarbone. He was about to raise his hand to wipe his sweat with the hem of his sleeve, but the sweat on his forehead had already been wiped away with a handkerchief. My lord." Wei Si followed the direction of her hand and was almost frightened by Jiang Pingji. "Just take care of Dabai." Jiang Pingji retracted her hand, as if the person who wiped his sweat was not her. Wei Si endured it, and could only swallow back the words he had yet to say. At that moment, a crisp ding-dong sound came from Jiang Pingji's mind, and a large system notification popped up. System notification. The merging of the live stream rooms has been completed. The current level is level 6, and the maximum number of live stream rooms is 850,000. Under normal circumstances, when the live stream room was upgraded to level 6, the maximum number of viewers should be 700,000. However, Jiang Pingji snatched the other streaming room and shut down the subsystem. The two streaming rooms had merged. After combining the 700,000 upper limit of the woman from another world and Jiang Pingji's 150,000 upper limit, the upper limit of the streaming room expanded to 850,000. Jiang Pingji glanced at the button to start the streaming room. The originally gray button had turned green, which meant that the streaming room could be operated normally. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. She felt that the bullet screen of the livestream that day would be very interesting. It might turn into a charaba. Start the live broadcast. Jiang Pingji pressed the button, and the beautiful and wide live streaming screen suddenly unfolded. The upper limit of the audience was indeed 850,000. Less than a second after she started the live stream, countless viewers swarmed in, and the empty screen was filled with two kinds of comments. One was red, and the other was blue. Even the ID of the audience was divided into red and blue. Sinusi. Good morning, host. The live broadcast room opened so late today. I'm not in the mood to work today. Qiangbing Zhaowu. I heard that the live stream is undergoing maintenance. The upper limit will be increased today. Why do I feel like it's still so hard to get a spot in the live stream? Inya. I think so too. Every time we fight for a seat, it reminds me of the shadow of fighting for a small bench in kindergarten. Luo Luo peanut candy. What's going on today? What happened to Dubai? He doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Izumo's Wahuan. Dubai is going to give birth. Is Beauty Ci a midwife? Many viewers beat their chests and stamped their feet. Why didn't they have a boyfriend who knew everything except getting pregnant and giving birth? Emolingin. I'm scared to death. Look at the upper limit of the live stream. Mama, it's actually 850,000. His words caused 1,000 ripples. Many viewers switched the screen to look at the number of viewers online. It was bright red and dazzling 850,000. They all knew about the maintenance and upgrading of the live stream room. But they always thought that an upgrade would increase the upper limit by tens of thousands at most. When the live stream room first appeared, the upper limit was only a pitiful 3,000 viewers. At that time, the audience jokingly called it the ancient era. To be able to get a seat in the live stream room at that time, one must have practiced the Qilin arm. Under the Bodhi tree, there is a grain of sand. I took a look. It's really 850,000. The bullet screen has turned red. In the past, we could only send simple white bullet screens. Now it's red. No, why can we also send blue bullet screens? Many viewers wanted to try the blue bullet screen, but they couldn't find the option to send blue bullet screens. Thousands of miles of mountains and rivers were so beautiful. They didn't expect to see so many blue bullet screens. It made people with obsessive-compulsive disorder uncomfortable. Taking a closer look, these blue bullet screens were a little strange. Sad Fat Pig Lou. What the hell? Why did the streamer change? I want to swallow heaven grassland. That's strange. Is the live stream room sold? Where did the previous streamer go? What the hell is this place? Watching film plus me. I didn't enter the wrong live stream room. Who the hell is this streamer? Don't call me Big Brother. I'm here to see beautiful girls, not to see two gay men and a mare. What the hell? Compared to the sea of red bullet screens, the number of blue bullet screens was much smaller. It was only 1/3 of the red ones. Shenjia. Are all the people above new? Our streamer has never changed, okay? Even if you want to spread rumors, you have to follow the basic rules. Ridiculous. The red and blue bullet screens each had their own opinions. However, the blue bullet screen had a lot of obscenities. The bullet screen immediately exploded. Just then a system mission announcement popped up. Chapter 857. This bullet screen was the standard brown color, meaning that it was a system announcement, but the audience's ID was blue. Without waiting for the red bullet comments to explode, the viewer with the ID "Brother has plenty of money" posted another bounty. A song of a beautiful dress danced, and the voice of a beautiful woman spread in all directions. Today, there was an audience member named "I have plenty of money," who was eager for the host to dance to a song. He requested for the dance to be moving and naked. Mission reward: 9 luxurious private helicopters. Audience member "Bro has plenty of money" whispered to the host, "Little girl, you just started in this industry, right? Be a little sweeter and call me hubby. In the future, I will especially treat you well and reward you." What? The audience in front of the screen was dumbfounded when they saw this bullet screen. When they came back to their senses, they were filled with endless anger. If it could be said that it was just brewing and about to erupt just now, then it was like magma gushing out, rushing into the sky. The overwhelming red bullet screen flooded in, and in an instant, the blue bullet screen was completely overshadowed. Happy point. I have plenty of money. Did your village just connect to the internet? Tell me your home address, and I'll fly over to chop you up. Only 9 luxurious private helicopters, equivalent to 9,000 renminbi. Liang Jingru gave you the courage to pretend to be rich in the live broadcast room? Songshua Shijian. What kind of country bumpkin is this? Nutty and little pudding. How dare you jump out without understanding the status of this streaming room in the streaming world? What a disgrace. Lao Siji Lianmeng. I'm sorry. I didn't zip up my pants properly, so this dirty thing is exposed. Thorn Bloom. My dog ran out. I'm going to drag him back by the leash. The red bullet screen kept surging like a geyser. They were all defending the unfamiliar streamer, Jiang Pingji. The viewers in the blue bullet screen were puzzled. This had always been the style of the live stream. Why was it like they had poked a hornet's nest today? This was like a group of old men who had been holding back for a long time, excitedly grabbing a handful of money and going to the brothel to have some fun. Unexpectedly, not only did they not see the erotic scene that they had imagined, but they were instead beaten up by a group of brainless burly men carrying sticks, to the point that they saw stars. The number of people on the blue screen was only 1/3 of the number of people on the red screen. Furthermore, the comments on the screen had a cooldown of half a minute, so they couldn't beat the red screen in terms of numbers. Many viewers in the blue bullet screen were so angry that they slammed the table or smashed the mouse while cursing. Are you crazy? They only wanted to look at the beauty to relieve their stress. Why did it seem like they had committed a grave mistake? Unbeknownst to him, the viewers in the red bullet screen were thinking the same thing. Which country bumpkin dared to behave atrociously here? Jiang Pingji had been live streaming for many years. Although she had never granted any audience any special privileges, the old viewers consciously maintained the order in the live stream room. They even established a special alliance organization. The identities of the members of the organization were announced. Each of them was a big shot in their respective fields. Occasionally, someone would come over to cause trouble. That person had to be mentally prepared to be dealt with. Many years ago, a tearful post appeared on the forum. A viewer teased Jiang Pingji. He posted a message on the bullet screen offering a reward, asking Jiang Pingji to call him brother and learn how to moan in bed. A minute later, the man received an email telling him that he was fired. His wife wanted to divorce him. Chiue Bohi. I'm so angry. Although the host usually ignores this kind of trash, I'm still angry. After a while, another system notification popped up. The grievances of the Jiang who have been settled. I only hope that the heroes will lend a helping hand. Today, viewer Chiue Bohi posted a reward to viewer I have plenty of money. The reward has reached as high as 9 luxurious private helicopters. If the number of votes exceeds 50%, viewer I have plenty of money will be forcefully kicked out of the live stream room and banned for 30 days. Viewer Chiu Bohi quietly said to I have plenty of money. The 9 helicopters are ready. If you want to see an erotic dance, go back to your chicken coop. Don't pollute other people's view here. The audience was stunned. What was going on? The function of the live stream room after the upgrade was amazing. For a big shot, anything that could be solved with money was not a problem. In the next second, a small voting box popped up on everyone's screen. After 0.1 seconds, viewer I have plenty of money was kicked out of the live stream room. The idle viewers in the red bullet screen were all stunned. There was actually such a thing. The system made another announcement. Viewer I have plenty of money has been kicked out of the live stream room. Half of the reward will be given back to the viewers in the red dimension. A bright red treasure chest filled with gold jumped out. When everyone poked it, the gold coins in the treasure chest splashed all over the place. Although the reward was very little, it gave them a great sense of achievement. This was like snatching red packets in the WeChat group. Knowing that they could only snatch 0.01 yuan, there were still people who would happily snatch red packets from their phones. Seeing this, the viewers in the blue bullet screen could no longer sit still. Some of the more angry viewers were ready to kick someone out. Chapter 858. No, it might be even livelier than the new year. The viewers on the red bullet screen continuously kicked a few of the viewers on the blue bullet screen, who were spewing vulgarities or insults. Their momentum was as high as a rainbow. The viewers on the blue bullet screen were aggrieved and furious. Some of the hot-tempered ones had already started cursing. Since the beginning of the live stream, these nouveau riche viewers had never suffered such grievances. Compete in throwing money? Have they ever been afraid? It was just a live stream. When had they ever suffered such grievances? Why did the rich like to watch live broadcasts and throw money at the streamers? Apart from truly liking the streamer and rewarding her, he also enjoyed the feeling of being flattered by the beautiful streamer and being envied by the other streamers. The nouveau riche enjoyed the process of being pretentious. They were here to enjoy, not to be abused. How infuriating. They had just entered the live broadcast room to look at the pretty girls as usual. Why did they suddenly encounter a group of strange lunatics who bit anyone they saw? At this moment, the audience from the two dimensions had yet to realize that something was wrong. They only thought that they were from the same world. Adhering to the principle of being slapped in the face, a blue bullet screen viewer could no longer sit still. As a nouveau riche, if he couldn't enjoy the pleasure of being pretentious, he might as well be a salted fish. Big Brother Jiuling. Yiwu Yanling, I'm warning you, don't cross the line. Do you really think you're the only one with money? After this bullet screen was sent, a system announcement popped up. The grievances of the Jianghu have been settled. I only hope that the heroes will lend a helping hand. Today, spectator Big Brother 90 has issued a bounty to spectator Night Dance Flame Spirit. The bounty has already reached 9 luxurious private yachts. If the number of votes exceeds 50%, viewer Night Dance Flame Spirit will be forcefully kicked out of the live broadcast room and will be banned for 30 days. Audience member Big Brother 90 quietly said to Night Dance Flaming Spirit, "Your parents didn't teach you well, so I'm here to teach you how to be a person. Do you really think you can act like an elephant just because you've stuck 2 cloves of garlic in you? Little guy, don't try to act cool with me." After posting this reward, the blue bullet screen audience clicked their tongues and revealed a mocking smile on their faces. If it weren't for the fact that he had suddenly lost his privileged avatar, he would have long since kicked all these noisy red bullet comments away. That's right, this audience member was one of the tycoons in the female broadcast room. However, he did not like to talk. Usually, he would quietly watch the live stream and silently send gifts. He was always in the top 10 of the gifts list. He was waiting for the audience, Night Dance Flaming Spirit, to be kicked out of the live broadcast room. He didn't expect her to be so stubborn and fight him head-on. As soon as his bounty notice popped up, the system prompted him that a bounty had been placed on him by the spectator, Night Dance Flame Spirit. The grievances of the Jianghu have been settled. I only hope that the heroes will lend a helping hand. Today, spectator Night Dancing Flame Spirit has issued a bounty to spectator Big Brother 90. The bounty has already reached 9 luxurious private yachts. If the number of votes exceeds 50%, audience member Big Brother 90 will be forcibly kicked out of the live broadcast room and banned for 30 days. Spectator Night Dance Flaming Spirit quietly said to Brother 90, "Ha!" The other party didn't say any nonsense and just threw a cold ha. Being provoked like this, the tycoon's temper immediately flared up. Just as he was about to increase the bounty, a system window popped up on the page. "You have been kicked out of the live broadcast room." What the hell? The tycoon's curled up smile froze on his face. He was stunned for a second before he angrily smashed his phone. In the live broadcast room, the number of votes for Night Dance Flaming Spirit had barely reached 31%. Having successfully kicked out a blue tycoon, the idle spectators on the red bullet screen cheered like a tsunami. Watching a battle between tycoons, it couldn't get any better. Seeing this, the spectators on the blue bullet screen instantly felt bored and sullen. One after another, they began to retreat. They were here to look at the beauties and feast their eyes, not to watch a bunch of lunatics dance around. It was fine if the host was suddenly replaced, but the host that was replaced wasn't good looking and didn't know the rules. What was there to watch in a live broadcast like this? Gentle girl high school student. Where did these crazy people come from? Forget it. I'm not watching the live broadcast anymore. My lungs are about to explode. Throwing money to kick people without saying a word. What's the difference between this and a mad dog biting whoever it catches? Some of the spectators on the blue bullet screen chose to quit. The lucky tycoons would not easily admit defeat. It was a great humiliation to be defeated in the field that they had the least amount of. More and more tycoons on the blue bullet screen joined the battle. The entire live broadcast room was full of gunpowder. The proportion of the spectators on the blue bullet screen dropped from a quarter to a fifth. Almost all the spectators on the red bullet screen joined in. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie. What's going on today? I thought I could only watch the live broadcast just now. Suddenly, there was a notification that there was an empty seat, so I quickly grabbed one. A bite of Shanghai Jing. I'm so excited that I'm crying. I didn't expect that a school dog could grab a seat in my lifetime. The big shots were still fighting. The idle spectators were more concerned about the content of today's live broadcast. The bullet screen was densely packed. There were too many of them. Every inch of the screen was occupied. The idle spectators had to choose to block the bullet screen to watch the live broadcast. They wouldn't know if they didn't watch, but once they saw it, it was terrible. Their daughter, White, looked like she was having a difficult birth. The idle spectators were extremely worried. They all sent bullet screen messages to inquire about the specific situation. Little Lucky. White hasn't shown signs of giving birth yet. It's her first and premature birth. The foal's situation isn't optimistic. White kept whining like a slave. From time to time, it stuck out its tongue to lick Jiang Pingji's hand. Its teary eyes were filled with pity. Jiang Pingji didn't have the extra energy to care about the situation in the live broadcast room. She looked at Wei Ci with a solemn expression. Not ready yet? She used her hand to comfort White. At the same time, her scalp went numb as she glanced at White's belly. Her heart was filled with anxiety. When she helped Jingxian deliver the baby, Jingxian would cry out in pain. However, White was just a horse. Other than whimpering like a slave, it couldn't use words to express its emotions. Jiang Pingji's heart ached even more when she saw it. Other than trying her best to comfort White, she couldn't help at all. Wei Ci had already strenuously straightened the position of the foal. Beads of hot sweat seeped out of his forehead. He said, "It's almost time." White seemed to understand Wei Ci's words. Its whimpering became louder and louder. Its breathing became heavy, and its belly contracted and expanded rapidly. The foal's two front hooves were pressed together. Its head was tightly attached to its forelimbs. It slowly gave birth with White's strength. Wei Ci said, "Lord, please help." White consumed too much energy. If it was squeezed for a long time without giving birth, the foal would easily suffocate. Jiang Pingji didn't use her upper arms to roll up her sleeves. She casually rolled up her sleeves. She didn't mind that it was dirty. She directly held the foal's front hooves with both hands. Li Yin said, "Farewell, my lord." She turned her head and continued to be infatuated with the pony. Jiang Pingji shook her head. Li Yin's obsession with good horses was deep in his bones. There was no way to save him. At this time, she saw the audience asking if the newborn foal had a name. If it didn't have a name, then they would come up with one. She thought for a moment and turned to ask Li Yun, "What are you going to name the horse?" A few months ago, Li Yun had ordered this colt from her. As the owner, Li Yun naturally had the right to name the colt. Since ancient times, which good colt didn't have an awe-inspiring name? Not to mention, Fu Wang's peerless colt had an eye-catching name, Chasing Lightning. As for Jiang Pingji's steed Cough Cough, that was definitely an accident. They were obviously rare peerless horses, but one was called White, and the other was called Little White. It sounded so cute. Where was the awe-inspiring name? Li Yun scratched his head. He wasn't good at naming things, so he kicked the ball back to her. "Why don't you give it a name, my lord?" Jiang Pingji was silent for a moment. The audience in the streaming room went crazy with bullet screens. "Please don't let the streamer name it. She's bad at naming things." Unfortunately, their thoughts didn't reach Li Yun. What they were most worried about still happened. Jiang Pingji thought for a while and said seriously, "Look at its snow-white body. Why don't we call it White?" Li Yun. "My lord, can I take back my request for a name?" Jiang Pingji asked. "Is it not good?" Li Yun didn't dare to say no. If he said no, Warner would find out and cause trouble for him. No. It's a good name. I can tell it's a beautiful white horse just by hearing it." Jiang Pingji left contentedly. Li Yun looked at the colt in the stable that staggered to its feet, and sighed with melancholy. Although the name White doesn't sound good, It can't be changed when the Lord gives it a name. Lian looked at his future comrade with melancholy. He nagged the stableman to take good care of White. The stableman nodded and bowed in agreement, not daring to object. It was his fault for carelessly letting a poisonous snake into the stable and scaring the pregnant horse. His lord didn't pursue the matter, so he should be grateful. Now he had to be extra careful and take good care of the newborn colt to make up for his mistake. On the other side, Wei Xi hopped onto an inconspicuous path and returned to his mansion. When the servant saw him in such a sorry state, he almost jumped in fright. Which cesspool did his Langjun fall into? How did he end up like this? Wei Xi said calmly. Go and prepare some hot soup and clean clothes. Yes, I'll go and prepare now. The servant was very efficient. Wei Xi immersed his body in water of suitable temperature. Only then did his sore and swollen muscles relax. He washed himself with pig fungus twice to wash away the strange smell on his body. He changed into clean clothes and carefully burned some incense. After a while, he heard the gatekeeper report that someone was visiting. Who is it? Wei Xi took the visiting card and looked at the handwriting on it. He smiled. Quickly let Yumo in. He had originally planned to catch up with Cheng Jing, but he didn't expect the incident with White to happen. He was so busy that he almost forgot. He had just finished bathing, so his hair was still wet. It was very impolite to meet a guest like this. However, he and Cheng Jing were from the same sect and had a close relationship, so it was fine. Cheng Jing saw his expression and teased him with a smile. We're not in Langi now. Why are you becoming more and more lazy? Wei Xi replied with a smile. How can I be lazy when I see a gentleman? Cheng Jing almost rolled his eyes in his heart. If Wei Xi had to bathe and burn incense every time he saw him, why didn't he receive such treatment in the past? You're getting sharper and sharper. Cheng Jing smiled. Usually, you don't leave your medicine alone. Now that you're full of vigor, you should really show those who are worried about you. The land here is really good for nurturing people. Look at your complexion, you look much better than before. I'll be relieved if I know. Although Wei Xi was the last person to become Master Yuanjing's disciple, he had been studying in Langi Academy longer than Cheng Jing, who was the first disciple. When Wei Xi was born, his 8 characters were taboo. If Master Yuanjing hadn't coincidentally visited the Wei residence, there might not have been Wei Xi. Strictly speaking, Master Yuanjing not only taught Wei Xi, but he also saved his life. They were both teachers and friends. In Wei Xi's heart, Master Yuanjing was also equivalent to his other father. I've been away from home for a few years. I wonder how teacher is doing now. In his previous life, Wei Xi had moved to Zhongzhao's Bianzhou with his clansmen. He hadn't seen his teacher Master Yuanjing for more than 20 years. Chapter 860. Now that he was reborn, Wei Xi was always concerned about his teacher's recent situation. Unfortunately, the world was becoming more and more chaotic, and a letter was comparable to 10,000 gold pieces. The round trip would take at least half a year. If they were unlucky, they might even lose contact with their letters. Wei Xi had not received his teacher's reply for a long time. Cheng Jing was under Huangsong's command. Huangsong's territory was in Haozhou, which was only a month's journey away from Langi County. Communication was relatively convenient there. He said, recently teacher has had many happy events. He's doing well. Oh, what happy event? Wei Xi was delighted. If Master Yuanjing could live a good life, he would feel better. Last year, Langi Academy recruited a student with great spiritual energy, and the teacher was overjoyed. Although this man was born in a poor family and had no parents, his talent was amazing, and his appearance was not ordinary. He was born with a cinnabar dot on his forehead, so Wunyang took a fancy to him at first sight. You also know that teacher dotes on Wunyang, and has always been worried about her marriage. Now that he had met a suitable candidate, how could he not be happy? Acting as a go-between, and helping the two of them get married. The Wunyang that Cheng Jing mentioned was Master Yuanjing's youngest daughter. Her maiden name was Zhu Qingning. Wunyang had always been fond of Wei Xi. Unfortunately, the falling flower was in love with Wei Xi, But the heartless stream was heartless. The goddess had Mengxiang, but King Wang had no feelings for her. She was not a vulgar woman. When Wei Ci explicitly rejected her, she felt uncomfortable for a while, and then let go. When he heard that Wunyang had been betrothed to someone, Wei Ci first felt happy for her, but then he frowned. The man was born in a poor family, and had no parents. His conditions were indeed a little poor. The teacher loved Wunyang so much. How could he choose such a son-in-law for her? He had always regarded himself as Wunyang's elder, and even treated her as his daughter. In Wei Ci's eyes, Wunyang's husband was naturally equivalent to his son-in-law. Usually, Wei Ci made friends regardless of one's family background. However, the standards for a father-in-law to judge his son-in-law and to make friends were different. Is this the teacher's choice or Wunyang's idea? Wei Ci knew how much his teacher loved his daughter. He wished he could pluck the stars and the moon and bring them to Wunyang. How could such a loving father choose such a husband for his daughter? Cheng Jing understood the meaning behind Wei Ci's words, and instantly understood the hidden meaning in his words. He said, although teacher loves Wunyang dearly, he won't indulge her without principles. Since he had agreed to this marriage, it was clear that his teacher was also satisfied. Come to think of it, what was so special about that person? At the end of the day, a teacher is also a father, and I still hope for my children's happiness. Wei Ci asked again, what is that person's name and where does he live? In his previous life, he had moved to Zhongzhou with his clansmen, but he had never stopped contacting his friends. He had always kept in touch with them through letters. He vaguely remembered that Wunyang married one of his teacher's students. That person was a young scholar in Langya County, and was known for his talent. However, after the second marriage, Wunyang didn't live a happy life. In the end, she divorced and went home for some reason. Cheng Jing thought for a moment and said, I heard that he's from Zhongzhou's Bianzhou. His surname is Nie, and his name is Sun. His courtesy name is Chungyun. Nie Sun? Wei Ci furrowed his brows and rummaged through his memories, but he could not find any trace of it. Cheng Jing asked, Zishao, have you heard of this person? Wei Ci shook his head. I've never heard of him. Perhaps this person is a late bloomer, and only became famous recently. Whether it was in his previous life or this life, Wei Ci had never heard of this person called Nie Sun. This was suspicious. One must know that Wei Ci had lived in Zhongzhou for many years in his previous life. Although he was an invisible person who was not valued, he still visited his relatives and friends. To put it bluntly, there was almost no famous scholar in Zhongzhou's Bianzhou that he had not met. If Nie Sun's talent could catch the eye of Master Yuan Jing, there was no reason for him to be unknown in his previous life. As for the inborn cinnabar between his eyebrows, such an obvious mark, if Wei Ci had really seen or heard of it, it was impossible for him not to have any impression. Could it be that this Nie Sun had only appeared in this life? Thinking of this, Wei Ci felt relieved. The difference between his previous life and this life was too great. Even the big picture of the world had been distorted, let alone ordinary people. However, this person was born in Zhongzhou's Bianzhou. What is his relationship with the Nie family in Bianzhou? The Wei family in Langya, which Wei Ci belonged to, was a branch of the Wei family in Bianzhou. The former had fallen, but the latter was still flourishing. There were two aristocratic families in Bianzhou. One was the Wei family, and the other was the Nie family. The two families had been connected by marriage for generations, and had a close relationship. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that the Nie family became a hegemon in troubled times, and was the third last feudal power to be eliminated by His Majesty. Thinking back to that time, there were no less than 20 feudal lords in the world. For the Nie family to be able to survive until then, it was obvious how powerful they were. Of course, after the Nie family surrendered, they did not stop stirring shit up. Thinking of this, Wei Ci's eyes had a hint of coldness. In the case of Crown Prince Zhangzhou, in the 18th year of Emperor Yongchen of the Zhang dynasty, the Nie family secretly added fuel to the fire. Other than large families like the Nie family and the Wei family, there were many other aristocratic families involved. If they had not instigated, schemed, and tried to sow discord, the outcome would not have been like that. He and His Majesty were responsible for their improper upbringing. But at the end of the day, these ambitious aristocratic families were the main culprits. Cheng Jing smiled and said, according to the rumors, Nie Sun was adopted by a branch of the Nie family. If he was born in the Nie family, how could he be considered to have a humble background? It was precisely because he was adopted, his background was unknown, and his adoptive parents died early, that Nie Sun was looked down upon. Wei Xi said, that's true. It's just that, this person is related to the Nie family. Why did he come to Dongqing to study? Master Yuanjing's reputation was indeed resounding, and he was comparable to a famous teacher in the world. However, aristocratic families like the Nie family had always implemented clan education, and arrogantly thought that people like Master Yuanjing were just unorthodox. Even if Master Yuanjing's students were all top-notch, they were still criticized by these people. Nie Sun came to Dongqing to study, and he even became Master Yuanjing's son-in-law. Wasn't this a slap in the face to the Nie family? Cheng Jing said, I vaguely heard that Nie Sun is not from Zhongzhou, and his hometown is in Dongqing. Perhaps he came here to look for his relatives? Although Nie Sun's surname is Nie, the Nie family does not acknowledge it. He stayed in the Nie family and suffered from both sides. So he might as well come out and be independent. Heroes emerge in troubled times. Nie Sun was really talented, and he could become famous even after leaving the Nie family. Wei Xi nodded and did not say anything. He was not curious about Nie Sun, and he only asked a few more questions because he was Wu Nyang's husband. Naturally, there were endless things to talk about when they reunited. Wei Xi asked about the others, and Cheng Jing hesitated and said, Wenbin sent a letter recently, and it seems that he wants to go to Zhe County to take a look. Wenbin was naturally referring to Han Yu. Wei Xi remembered that Han Yu worked under Su Pei in his previous life, so he was not surprised that Han Yu went to Zhe County. What about Xiaoyin? I haven't heard from Xiaoyin for a long time. Wei Xi asked again. He remembered that Lu Zheng sought refuge with Huang Song in his previous life. Huang Song was defeated and killed himself, and Lu Zheng guarded the last isolated city and refused to surrender. When the city was breached, he cried blood and cursed, and jumped down from the city wall. If there were no changes in this life, then Xiaoyin would have gone to find Huang Song. To Wei Xi's surprise, Cheng Jing did not know Lu Zheng's whereabouts. Half a year ago, Xiaoyin said that he wanted to go to the alliance meeting, but there is no other news until now. Wei Xi choked, and then shook his head helplessly. Chapter 861. Both Cheng Jing and Wei Xi had written letters to their schoolmates, but everyone had their own plans. Han Yu and Lu Zheng had their own opinions. It couldn't be forced. Old friends reunited. Even though they belonged to two different camps, they could still talk happily, as long as it didn't involve official business. After talking for a while, they seemed to have returned to their student days in the academy. The estrangement that they hadn't seen each other for years had disappeared, and they were closer. At the same time, Jiang Pingji was also very happy that day because the idle fish in the streaming room took all the laughs. She wore a bamboo hat leisurely, carried a fishing rod and basket, and found a place where no one was around to fish. She said she was fishing to add to the meal for her subordinates, but what was the truth? She just didn't want to stay in the government office to deal with paperwork. Fishing while watching the battle between the red and the blue in the streaming room. It was a joy in life. Obviously, the viewers on the red bullet screen were Jiang Pingji's fans, and the viewers on the blue bullet screen were her original viewers. From the beginning of the battle between the tycoon and the tycoon, the viewers on the red bullet screen fought steadily and steadily, which made the viewers on the blue bullet screen fly into a rage. In the words of the viewers on the red bullet screen, "I just like to see you fly into a rage, but can't do anything to me." It could be said that this operation was already very cool. I really don't know who led these idle fish astray. Their combat power is actually so strong. No matter how fierce the battle between the two sides was, Jiang Pengji was as steady as a mountain. She half lay on the giant rock by the stream and squinted her eyes to fish. In the eyes of the viewers on the red bullet screen, Jiang Pingji's behavior couldn't be more normal. Their streamer was so aloof and rarely interacted with them. If she interacted with them one day, the idle fish viewers would panic and be afraid that the streamer had been transmigrated by someone else. Even if Jiang Pingji was so aloof and distant, they still loved her very much. On the contrary, the viewers on the blue bullet screen became more and more bored as they watched. They chose to leave one after another, cursing before they left. How cui xiaojia. Let's go. What kind of trash streaming is this? You didn't even say a word after watching it for so long. Ingu Mao. I thought there would be some special streaming, but I didn't see anything after watching it for so long. Go ahead and fish, at least say something. You're so aloof. Do you think everyone wants to watch your streaming? To put it bluntly, at least the previous host knew how to dance erotically, tease the audience, and liven up the atmosphere. The current one was a block of wood, stupid and ugly. What a waste of my traffic. Disappointing. Of course I'm forgiving her. I heard that this live stream is very powerful. I've been driving for more than 20 years, and have never been censored by the country. I'm here because of its reputation. How is it censored? Forget it. It seems like I won't be able to see any interesting content. I'll leave first, the traffic can't keep up. Heavenly visitor. I feel cheated. I'm leaving too. Lang Defungi. It's a little strange. These red bullet screens seem to know this streamer. They're as crazy as dogs. Most of the blue bullet screen viewers chose to cross and leave in disappointment. After half a day, only 10% of the blue bullet screen viewers remained. Of course, this 10% of the audience was either bored out of their minds or bored out of their minds. In any case, it was very difficult to get a spot in this live broadcast room. Being able to get a spot meant that they had fast hands and good internet connection. The bullet screen war in the streaming room went on for a long time. Jiang Pingji fished for a long time, but her fishing basket was still empty. Some salted fish could not stand it anymore and urged Jiang Pingji to give up. Nuzwang Xinghang. Streamer, you'd better stop struggling. You can't even catch a shrimp, let alone a big fish. Accept the reality. Jiang Pingji's momentum was too strong. Wild animals were far more sensitive than humans. Where she was, all fishes and shrimps were basically extinct. Every time she came out to fish, other people would catch one. But she always got nothing. But fishing was about loneliness, not fish. Jiang Pingji sat cross-legged, holding the fishing rod in her right hand, her left hand on her knee, and her chin propped up. There was no one around, so she did not need to send bullet screens. She spoke directly to the audience. I see that the streaming room is especially lively today. You guys don't get along very well. What do you mean by not getting along very well? The salted fish were stunned, and it took them a while to react. Little angel. People with different beliefs cannot make plans together. There's no way we can get along. Streamer, do you know where these bumpkins on the blue bullet screen came from? The originally good atmosphere had unexpectedly turned into a mess. If I had known this would happen, I would not have leveled up. I'd rather fight with countless salted fish for 15 spots in the streaming room than stay in the same streaming room with these losers all day. Guikai Guofengxio. I don't want to get along. I'm so angry that I want to jump up and beat their heads. I'm so angry. Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes in front of everyone, like a salted fish that was stranded on the shore. She yawned. People from 2 dimensions are fighting for a limit of 850,000 people. People of all kinds can sneak in. I can't do anything about it. It depends on your hand speed. The streaming room has a limit of 850,000 people. Whoever is faster will be able to get it. The group of salted fish. Wait, they seem to have overlooked something? Host, can you repeat what you just said one more time? That's a lot of information. Let's highlight the words 2 dimensions. Jilan Yushu. Wait, streamer, don't scare me. What do you mean by 2 dimensions? Could it be that the color represents the dimensions? The red bullet screen is for allies, and the blue bullet screen is for people from another dimension? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, why would I scare you? It's really 2 dimensions. Whether it was the salted fish in the red bullet screen, or the defeated soldiers in the blue bullet screen, both sides were so shocked that their eyes widened and their jaws dropped to the ground. They had been fighting for half a day. Both sides were furious. One by one, they said that they wanted human flesh. They fought it out. However, no matter how powerful the big shots were, they could not find any clues. It was as if the people on the other side had appeared out of thin air. So, they were actually people from another dimension? Chamidalao. Wait, did I go too far just now? Did they all die? People from 2 dimensions can actually fight in the same streaming room and watch the streamer from a 3rd dimension. This is epic making fate. Hello my friends. Duxing Yufeng. If I knew this would happen, I would have been gentler just now. In the sea of red bullet screens, a small group of blue bullet screens occasionally floated by, but they were immediately caught. Fanlu. Hello, my friends from the other dimension. Xinjia. Friends on the other side, look over. The bullet screens here were very exciting. Due to the huge disparity in the number of people, the blue bullet screen was swaying and trembling in the sea of red bullet screens. It looked very pitiful. Although the viewers on the blue bullet screen were very annoying, they were able to tolerate all kinds of people. They would not kill a person from the same dimension in one go. No matter what group it was, there would always be good and bad. They had to be tolerant and get rid of the weeds. However, the salted fish's way of thinking was always different from normal people. One of the audience in the red bullet screen could not help but complain. Chapter 862. Why did the viewers from 2 different dimensions use Chinese characters? It was a good question, but Jiang Pingji couldn't answer it. She made up a story with her eyes wide open. Maybe it's because Chinese characters are the universal language of the entire dimension? The viewers in the 2 streaming rooms were speechless after hearing it. What she said made sense. I'm actually speechless? A certain viewer on the blue bullet screen spoke shakily. He was mentally prepared to be kicked out of the streaming room by the big boss on the red bullet screen, Buxian Xian. In the past, there were always people who said that English was the universal language of the world. Now I can hold my head high and say that Chinese characters are the universal language of the entire dimension. I'm so touched. I hope the country can take this seriously and abolish CET4 and CET6. In the sea of red bullet screens, the blue bullet screen was particularly eye-catching. It even received countless likes. The viewers on the red bullet screen cheered for the blue bullet screen. CET4 and CET6 were all tearful after saying too much. The 2 groups of people who were fighting each other to the death were now tearful when they saw each other from the same place. The 2 sides had a friendly discussion about the 2 dimensions. However, the restrictions of the streaming room were too great. They couldn't talk about topics related to politics. They racked their brains and could only figure out the timeline of the 2 dimensions. Other than some differences in historical events, the general situation was actually the same. Many quick-witted and ill-intentioned people had already come up with crooked ideas. Since the situation of the 2 dimensions was so similar, but the development was different, could they help each other? Thinking about the more popular plagiarism category in online novels, maybe they could imitate it. Who knows, it might become popular. Anyway, it was 2 different worlds. Even if someone pointed out plagiarism, it would be extremely difficult for the 2 dimensions to pursue the matter of plagiarism. To put it nicely, they could learn from each other and develop together. They couldn't bear to let the magnificent civilization disappear just like that. Jiang Pingji casually glanced at the bullet screen in the streaming room. Many viewers also noticed it. Some felt that plagiarism was wrong. Some felt that since they were from 2 dimensions, what was wrong with exchanging civilizations? Anyway, the original author couldn't cross the dimension wall to pursue the matter and sue. Online novels were all like this. No one would know even if they plagiarized. They forgot that this was Jiang Pingji's streaming room. As a streamer in a level 6 streaming room, her authority was higher than before. After a while, those in the audience who were discussing the feasibility of borrowing were all kicked out. They were stunned for a moment. When they looked at the system notification again, their faces couldn't help but twitch. Because you have violated the rules of the live broadcast room, You have been kicked out of the live broadcast room by the host. To be honest, this was the first time Jiang Pingji took the initiative to kick someone since she took over the streaming room. Even a fool would know that she was a little angry. Not only were there blue comments, but there were also quite a number of red comments. Jiang Pingji had a warm smile on her face. According to the federal law on the protection of original works of literature and all kinds of property rights, the crime of plagiarism is very serious. The minimum penalty is 3 years, and the maximum is life. Even if they weren't sued by the original creator, 90% of the profits would still belong to the original creator, and they would have to compensate for their mental distress. If you want to use it as a reference, I won't object. But please ask the original author to personally authorize it. Furthermore, you can request the government to take the lead and establish a special alliance to regulate the cultural exchange between the two planes. After that, she got up to pack up her fishing rod and basket, preparing to go home. After hearing what Jiang Pingji said, some of the audience blushed. Some felt that she was meddling in other people's business, while others strongly supported her. After all, the streaming room was someone else's territory, and the audience had to act according to the basic rules. After going through half a day of battle, the audience from the two planes could barely communicate calmly. Seeing this, Jiang Pingji revealed a faint smile and leisurely returned to the city. Unbeknownst to her, the matter of the streaming room had grown wings and occupied the headlines of major websites. It was fine if it was a cross-dimensional live broadcast, but now she could communicate with the audience from another plane on the same streaming platform. She was going to go to heaven. The red comments were relatively calm. Although Jiang Pingji's streaming room was a little strange and often showed all kinds of violent scenes, on the whole, it was still positive. Many directors who filmed ancient wars liked to edit the content of the live broadcast and use it as a reference. Nowadays, the film and television industry preferred to shoot indoors more and more. They used the green screen wherever it was useful, and they rarely spent energy on shooting real scenes. In general, Jiang Pingji's streaming room was more positive in the eyes of the public. However, it was different for the viewers in the blue bullet screen. As soon as the news spread, it was like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples. Abuse and mockery had the absolute upper hand. Thanks to the female transmigrator, the streaming room had been labeled as despicable. In addition, the streaming room had been around for more than 20 years. Many of the audience had a fixed impression of it. Once it was mentioned, they could not help but curse or mock it, as if it was a pile of stinky feces. After such a long time, the audience in the streaming room had been fixed. Now that the streamer had suddenly changed, not only did it not attract new readers, but it also drove away this part of the audience who liked beautiful women. As a result, for a long time, the ratio of red to blue in Jiang Pingji's streaming room hovered around 9:1 or 19:1. The red bullet screen viewers were overjoyed. The cake was only so big. The streaming room's upper limit was 850,000. They could not wait for all the upper limit to be theirs. Yes, the streamer was theirs. No unruly people could snatch her away. Jiang Pingji did not care about this. She did not care which plane the audience was from, as long as they were not from her original plane. As a general of the Federation and the commander of 1/10 of the army, she had now been reduced to a small farm owner. Her fate was miserable. Humming a tune, Jiang Pingji walked into the city under the orange afterglow of the sunset. The streets were still bustling with business. The street vendors were shouting and hawking, and children were chasing and laughing. Ah! The child who was leading accidentally bumped into Jiang Pingji. She did not move an inch, but the child fell. There are carriages and pedestrians everywhere. You naughty children, if you want to play, go somewhere else. Jiang Pingji's face was fierce. She picked up the child who had fallen. The child was sobbing. A woman in the distance saw it, and was scared out of her wits. She hurriedly ran over to carry the child away. She was so scared that her shoulders were trembling. The woman saw Jiang Pingji's face clearly. It was as if someone had stolen her voice. She could not say anything. Jiang Pingji was usually very close to the people. Many people knew what she looked like. The woman had seen her before. My son is naughty and has disturbed the prefecture magistrate. As the woman knelt, the 2 or 3-year-old child in her arms knelt as well. Jiang Pengji had a very good memory. She saw the woman's face and found it somewhat familiar. You are. Listening to the woman's words, she was obviously not an ordinary village woman. Chapter 863. Jiang Pengji was surprised. She lifted her hand to help the woman up and said with a smile, "This isn't a good place to talk. Why don't we sit in the restaurant next door?" Judging from the woman's appearance, she lived a hard life. She lived frugally and only ate 1 meal a day. The child beside her was raised well. He was fair, chubby, and adorable. Even the clothes he wore were made of fine cotton. Fine cotton was not expensive, but for a peasant family with an average family, it was a huge expense. The woman hesitated for a moment, then beamed with joy. She carried the child in her arms and followed Jiang Pengji to the nearby reception house. The reception house was opened in all the towns and cities in Wanzhou. Its reputation was improving day by day. The dishes developed by the chefs were also changing day by day. Although it was geared towards middle and high-class customers, ordinary people could occasionally have a meal if they gritted their teeth. The woman followed Jiang Pengji to a private room. She and the old housekeeper lived frugally to support their young master. They had never been to the reception house. Order more of what you want to eat. This child, if I remember correctly, is he the one protected by his mother? How many people had Jiang Pengji saved during the earthquake in Shangjing? Most of the people in Xiangyang district today had followed her to escape from Shangjing to this place. The woman nodded with tears in her eyes. Her eyes were bloodshot, but she did not look like she had been wronged. Instead, she looked excited. She had always remembered Jiang Pengji, but she was a busy person. How could she remember her? She had just reminded her, but she did not have high hopes. She did not expect Jiang Pengji to be right. Yes, it is my young master. The woman nodded excitedly. The chubby child in her arms twisted in confusion. He looked at Jiang Pengji, and then at the woman who was holding him. He did not understand what had happened. He could only step on the thigh of the woman who was kneeling. He tiptoed and tried to wipe her tears with his chubby white paws. How have you been all these years? Jiang Pengji looked at the child and dug out the relevant fragments from her memory. She remembered that when she rescued the child from the ruins, the child was protected by a woman who had her back curled up. If the woman had not protected him with her body, her spine, and her head, arms, and chest, he would have died a long time ago. A pure smile appeared on the woman's face. It's all thanks to the prefecture overseer's good governance that I was able to survive in this world with my master. In the past, there were 20 people in the mansion, but after the earthquake, only 3 survived. A wet nurse, a housekeeper, and a 2-month-old child. The world outside was too chaotic. The 3 of them were old, weak women and children. There was no way for them to seek refuge with their relatives. They could only follow Jiang Pengji to Xiangyang district. The old housekeeper did the accounting and outside work, while she knitted sweaters or embroidered some patterns at home to sell. She lived frugally on weekdays. After deducting the small amount of rent paid to the county headquarters, the remaining money was enough for them to live on. The 2 of them were loyal and devoted servants. They would rather work themselves a little harder than suffer the slightest injustice to the child. Therefore, among the 3 of them, only the child was wearing clothes made of fine cotton. Jiang Pengji said, "You're the wet nurse? If I remember correctly, there was an old man who survived." The woman said, "Prefecture overseer, you have a good memory. That was my wife's dowry butler." Jiang Pengji said to the child, "Come here." The child was very guilty. He had just bumped into someone. How would he dare to take the initiative to approach her? The woman encouraged him, and he ran to Jiang Pengji hesitantly. Jiang Pengji carried him and bounced him up and down. The 2-year-old child was quite heavy. I remember that the child's family seems to be extraordinary. Have you never thought of bringing the child to look for his relatives after so many years? Before the earthquake, land in Shangjing was expensive. Those who could buy property there were either rich or respectable. Logically speaking, the child's parents were not ordinary people. The woman said, "I had this plan for a long time. but there were wars everywhere in the past. The housekeeper, and I didn't dare to bring the young master to take risks. Therefore, it has been delayed until now. I plan to save enough money in a few years to set off to look for my relatives, so as not to delay the young master's initiation. In the whole of Dongqing, what place was safer than Wanzhou? The lion was entrenched and heavily guarded. The prefecture magistrate loved the people like his own children. He governed the whole of Wanzhou in an orderly manner. Outside the boundaries of Wanzhou, there were either wars or all kinds of disasters. How could she and the old housekeeper protect the young master? Jiang Pingji carried the child and put some food in his bowl. What is this child's background? Since I saved him and met him on the street today, it seems that we are fated. If I can help, I can send someone to pass a message to the child's relatives and ask them to bring the child back as soon as possible. Looking at you, these years have not been easy. The woman's eyes turned red again. She kowtowed and said, "Thank you, prefecture magistrate. If there is a next life, I will definitely tie a ring to repay your kindness." Wiping away her tears, the woman continued, "My master is from the Cui family of Chongzhou." The Cui family of Chongzhou? Jiang Pingji carried the child in one hand and ordered the food on the table with the other. What a coincidence! Chongzhou was her father, Lu Shi's territory. As for the Cui family, Jiang Pingji had vaguely heard rumors about them. The Cui family had been in Chongzhou for a long time. They were the local tyrants, but they were not a proper noble family. They had resources, but they were looked down upon. The reason was simply because the Cui family had a close relationship with the northern borderline. They did business in both places. They were even fence-sitters. They leaned toward whichever side the wind blew. Jiang Pingji corresponded with Lu Shi. He did not have a high opinion of the Cui family. He even said that they reeked of money. How could they be noble and virtuous like scholars? At first glance, the Cui family was aligned with power and money. No wonder Lu Shi had such a bad impression of them. The woman nodded vigorously. She said, "My wife is the eldest daughter-in-law of the Cui family's first branch. Chongvo and the northern borderline were borderline. It had always been a place of constant conflict. Even if the Cui family was on good terms with the northern borderline, they could not stop the bandits from running amok. The Cui family sent the eldest daughter-in-law to Shangjing to await delivery. Who knew that they would encounter a rare earthquake?" Jiang Pingji had a change of heart. "My father is the prefecture magistrate of Chongzhou. What a coincidence. I will write a letter to my father and ask the Cui family to send someone to bring you back." For the woman, it was a difficult task, but for Jiang Pingji, it was as easy as lifting a finger. After the woman heard it, she kowtowed to Jiang Pingji a few times in excitement. She almost spoke incoherently. Jiang Pingji looked at the child and smiled meaningfully. She inquired about the residence of the woman and the child, and accompanied them for dinner. Only then did she return to the district headquarters under the thin and cold moonlight. She said to the people beside her, "Summon Wenzheng, Zishur and Zixiao. Tell them that I have something to discuss with them." The others were not in Xiangyang district. Jiang Pingji could only summon the three advisors first. Jiang Pingji waited for a while. Qiguan Rang, Feng Zhen, and Wei Xi arrived one after another. The three of them looked at each other. They did not know why Jiang Pingji summoned them alone. Chapter 864. Without the slightest precaution or apprehension, their lord had thrown them a thunderbolt just like that. Just 6 words, like a sudden clap of thunder, shocked the 3 trusted advisors, so much that they didn't know what time it was. "Attack the northern borderline now? My lord, you want to ascend to the heavens? What are we going to use to fight? Our heads?" Even Feng Zhen, who was always joking and frivolous, was so frightened by Jiang Pingji that he didn't dare to speak. Qiguan Rang didn't seem to have any reaction, but the feather fan in his hand was fanning furiously. It was obvious how anxious he was. Wei Xi was the first to react. He stepped forward and said, "My lord, you mustn't do that. Attacking the northern borderline now wasn't courage, it was courting death." Wei Xi had thought that his lord was more mature in this life than in her previous life, but now it seemed that she was even more reckless. Jiang Pingji laughed in her heart, but she asked, "Why not?" She didn't do it on a whim. She had clearly thought it through. They all treated her like an enemy, as if she was unreliable. Feng Zhen and Qiguan Rang followed closely to persuade her. No matter what, they had to make their lord dispel this dangerous idea. Qiguan Rang said, "My lord, attacking the northern borderline now is not a good time." Feng Zhen secretly took a deep breath. He stepped forward and said, "I agree with the two of you. The northern borderline has experienced the horse plague and suffered a great loss in military strength. But a centipede dies but never falls down. If we don't have the confidence to kill them in one strike, we can't easily attack the northern borderline. Attacking now is no different from striking a rock with an egg. The books on war say that the military is a matter of great importance to a country. It is a place of life and death, a path of survival. In our opinion, we need to go through 5 things: take advantage of the right time, the right place, and the right people. Only then can we give it our all. The time is not ripe yet, so we must not attack." Previously, they had agreed to peacefully develop for a few years before going to war. Why did their lord change her mind now? The 3 of them groaned in their hearts, but they also understood Jiang Pingji's temperament. If they didn't say the ugly things, it would be difficult to convince her to give up on this idea. Jiang Pingji sat in the seat of honor and leaned against the table. She said to Feng Zhen, "Zisher, continue." Feng Zhen said, "The so-called 5 things are Tao, heaven, earth, general and law." The so-called Tao referred to the agreement between the lord and the generals, and they could live and die together. The so-called heaven referred to the seasons and climate. The earth referred to the terrain conditions. The general referred to the martial arts and abilities of the generals. As for the law, it referred to the organization of the army, the division of duties between generals, and the logistics and material reserves. Now we disagree with our lord, and we don't know the terrain of the northern borderline and the weather conditions after the war. Although our generals are strong, the newly recruited soldiers have not been trained properly. As for the logistics and provisions, there is a huge gap. It will take 2 to 3 years for the army to be effective. Now that we have started the war, the conditions in all aspects are not ripe yet. I hope that my lord will think twice before acting and consider it carefully. To put it simply, if Jiang Pingji went head-to-head with the north borderline in her current condition, she would definitely be the one to die. Feng Zhen and the others couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they racked their brains. Why did their lord suddenly want to attack the northern borderline? Which idiot instigated this? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "I understand what Zisher is saying." Since she understood, why did she still have such a bold idea? Feng Zhen and the others complained about her incompetence. They even suspected that their lord was deliberately making fun of them. Jiang Pingji's next words made them so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. "However, I still want to fight." Wei I didn't say a word. He just secretly watched Jiang Pingji's expression. Qiguan Rang, who was beside him, slowed down his fanning. He said, "Can you tell us the reason, my lord?" His lord's wisdom was not inferior to that of an ordinary strategist. Her thoughts were even more imaginative. She might really have a reason for doing this. Jiang Pingji said, "Of course, it's impossible to contend with the northern borderline with just Wanzhou alone. Moreover, I'm not saying that we have to fight now." The 3 of them were speechless. They inexplicably felt like they had been f***ed. Qiguan Rang's eyes darkened. He seemed to have thought of something, and a layer of worry appeared in his heart. "Then what do you mean, my lord?" Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pingji said, "I think it's time to discuss it with my father. The situation in Wanzhou has stabilized. The recruitment of troops is proceeding smoothly, but Chongzhou and Hu County are both in my father's hands. I don't understand the situation there. Even with my father's help, the trouble we'll encounter will not be small. Those who are loyal to my father may not be loyal to me. While it's still early, I want to merge the existing forces into one as soon as possible. Only when the people's hearts are completely united can we have a chance of winning against the northern borderline." Feng Zhen's eyes turned. He seemed to understand Jiang Pingji's reasoning. He asked, "My lord, are you worried that your stepbrother has ulterior motives? Lu Shi only had a son and a daughter." In the future, the family property would definitely be divided between the two children. The stepbrother was now 14 years old. In a few years he would be able to establish his own family. If he was ambitious and competed with Jiang Pingji, it would indeed be troublesome. The external threat had not been resolved yet, but internal problems had arisen. If the siblings fought and held each other back, how could they stand firm in this chaotic world? The best way was to completely stabilize their position and power before the stepbrother grew up. Now that Jiang Pingji wanted to attack the northern borderline, it was an excellent excuse to take over the military power of Chongzhou and Hu County from Lu Shi's hands. The three trusted subordinates had their imaginations run wild. They were all convinced by their own ideas. Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh. She was unwilling to explain too much. They would know the truth when the time came. Lu Shi naturally supported her. However, even if she was Lu Shi's daughter, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou and Hu County might not be willing to accept her. Jiang Pingji did not want to attack the northern borderline a few years later. Her subordinates were still disorganized and in a mess. She continued, "Today I met someone. This person may be the breakthrough point for us to gather the forces in Chongzhou. Chongzhou and the northern borderline are borderline. Once war breaks out, it will definitely be embroiled in the flames of war. As for Hu County, that place has a vast land but a small population. Although it produces a lot of grain, if we farm for a few years, it will be enough for the war. From the looks of it, gathering Chongzhou is far more important than gathering Hu County." When Wei Xiai and the others heard this, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Based on what their lord meant, they should start preparing for war now instead of fighting. They could be at ease. Wei Xiai asked, "Who is this person?" Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "That person is a direct descendant of the Cui family in Chongzhou. We can make friends with the Cui family in the name of saving their lives and persuade them to stand on our side. The Cui family is a fence-sitter. They have close business dealings with the northern borderline. In other words, they are the most knowledgeable about the situation in the northern borderline. If we want to start a war with the northern borderline, we must have an accurate source of information. Apart from that, the Cui family has been rooted in Chongzhou for a long time. If we take down the Cui family, we can use them to gather other local gentry families. Regardless of whether it was external or internal, the Cui family could be Jiang Pingji's springboard." Lu Shi had been the magistrate of Chongzhou for many years. Although he controlled part of the power, the majority was still in the hands of the local aristocratic families in Chongzhou. These aristocratic families had many thoughts. The interests of the family far surpassed the righteousness of the country. They could totally stab their teammates in the back at a critical moment. Jiang Pingji did not want someone to plot against her behind her back when she was fighting a war. Chapter 865. The three of them were smart. How could they not understand Jiang Pingji's plan? But in that case, she would have to take away Lu Shi's power. This meant that there would be a conflict of interest between father and daughter. If Lu Shi was old, it would not be too much to abdicate. But Lu Shi was still in the prime of his life. Would he be willing to give up his military power and be a free rich man? Whether it was Wei Xiai or Feng Zhen, they had no confidence in this matter. Qiguan Rang turned his gaze to Jiang Pingji and hinted vaguely, "My lord has to discuss this matter with the old master." Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes and said, "I know. Father will understand." Qiguan Rang waved his fan and said, "If we can cooperate with the Cui family and understand the situation and military deployment in the northern borderline, we will have the geographical advantage. Popularizing the method of farming will completely solve the food shortage in 2 to 3 years. The army will be self-sufficient. The generals have rich experience in war and are very familiar with training troops. In the long run, they will definitely be able to train up a fierce and powerful army. At the same time, the northern borderline will be greatly weakened by the horse plague. Later, with Zixiao's strategy of rabbits and sheep, we will have the power to fight the northern borderline in 3 to 5 years. It's said in military books that the poor of a country will lose to the teacher, and the people will be poor. Wei Xi added, if we fight the northern borderline, the long-distance transportation of food will inevitably increase the pressure. The price of food near the army will skyrocket. The local people will be affected, and their financial resources will be exhausted. More importantly, the longer the transportation of food is, the higher the risk. Once the food line is cut, the soldiers at the front will be in a desperate situation. In my opinion, my lord can send people to farm in Chongzhou and greatly reduce the transportation of food, so that the soldiers will not have to worry about the rear. If food was transported from Hu County or Wanzhou to the front line in Chongzhou, the consumption would be unimaginable. In ancient times, the transportation of food mainly relied on manpower and animal power. The journey was long and time-consuming. It did not mean that the front line would receive the same amount of food as the amount of food transported to the front line. The animals that transported the food had to eat, and the laborers that transported the food had to eat too. If the front line received 1 dan of food, the rear had to send 20 to 30 dan. If there was a war, it was best to farm in a large scale near the front line. This would greatly reduce the risk and consumption of food transportation. But if that was the case, Wei Xi could not help but frown when he thought of other things. Jiang Pingji asked him, Zixiao, did you think of something? Wei Xi's expression stiffened. He sighed and said, due to the impact of the horse plague, the economy of the northern borderline has been severely damaged. As a result, the price of foodstuffs has skyrocketed. A large number of lowly herdsmen are unable to afford foodstuffs and live a difficult life. If the northern borderline knows that we are stationing farmland on a large scale at the border of Chongzhou, when the time comes, it will definitely attract a large number of cavalry to plunder. Xi's consideration was not thorough. I'm afraid that the plan just now will not work. If that was the case, all the grain they had planted in the fields would be taken away by the northern borderline. Were they storing food for themselves or sending food to the enemy? When Wei Xi understood this, he felt ashamed and bowed to ask for forgiveness. Jiang Pingji said, you're right. Why do I need to apologize? It was a good idea to station fields at the border of Chongzhou to reduce the consumption of grain. If the northern borderline sends their cavalry to raid us, we don't have to be afraid. We can directly use these people to practice and get used to the northern borderline's fighting style in advance. However, Zizhao's suggestion had to be changed. Farming is fine, but it cannot be concentrated in one place. Set up a few more. Currently, the northern borderline could not mobilize their cavalry on a large scale. They could only plunder on a small scale. If the northern borderline's cavalry came to plunder, they would not be able to plunder much at one time. The losses were small, and they could use them to practice. If the grain was stored in one place, if the enemy sneaked around and attacked from behind, wouldn't it be awesome to burn the granary? The 4 of them discussed the details in detail. Only when the first rays of dawn were slightly tipsy did Jiang Pingji end the topic reluctantly. The 3 strategists who were forced to stay up all night to work overtime were speechless. Let's stop talking about this first. I'll write a letter to my father and explain the reason to him. He will support me. Jiang Pingji stretched her body peacefully and said to the 3 of them, do you want to stay for breakfast? Today's breakfast is pork buns with mushrooms. It tastes delicious. Feng Zhen was used to wandering around. He often stayed up late, but he was not tired. Qiguan Rang's work and rest schedule had always been stable. He paid attention to his health, but his lord was inhumane. He was used to staying up late. Needless to say, Wei Xi did not even have eye bags after staying up all night. Thank you, my lord. The 3 of them ate breakfast with Jiang Pingji and went back with their heads full of battle details. Feng Zhen and Wei Xi were both single people. Their mansions were close to each other. When he and Wei Xi returned, he would shake his head while reminiscing about the craftsmanship of the kitchen in the district headquarters. It made Wei Xi dizzy. Wei Xi asked, Sure, don't shake your head. I'm dizzy just looking at you. Feng Zhen said, shake your head and see if water has entered your brain. Wei Xi was speechless. Feng Zhen continued, back then, I was really blinded by lard. How did I end up here? Of all the lords I could have chosen, I just had to choose the one who was the most difficult to serve. If it really didn't work out, I might as well not become an official and be a wealthy idler at home. Now I have money but no land envoy. There are beauties I can't touch, wine I can't drink, and I don't even have time to sleep. Once I'm on board, I can't get off. Just like last night, the Lord had a sudden impulse and dragged them along to discuss for the whole night. The whole night. Did the Lord still remember that he was sick and weak? She was really using men like mules. Wei Xi suddenly said, "My lord, why are you here?" Feng Zhen was so scared that his whole body trembled. He hugged Wei Xi and hid behind him. However, where's the Lord? Wei Xi smiled innocently. I'm just scaring you. Feng Zhen was speechless. How could he have been so blind to have such a close friend? What a scam! Feng Zhen silently recited the mind-clearing mantra several times before he resisted the urge to strangle Wei Xi. As they neared the door, Feng Zhen suddenly said, "Zixiao, do you think the old master will really give up power?" Jiang Pingji had been in the limelight in recent years, but Lu Shi had been famous for a long time and was now in his prime. Would he really be willing to give up power to his daughter? It's hard to say. Wei Xi lowered his eyelids and sneered coldly. But with the Lord's temperament, he has always done things even though he knows it's impossible. If the old master is a smart man, he will make the most correct choice. How can that bastard compete with the Lord? Although Lu Shi was different from his previous life, Wei Xi could not be at ease with him. However, his Lord did not react at all. She trusted Lu Shi, so Wei Xi could not say anything. The two of them conversed in low voices. They came face to face with a handsome brown-haired youth with a silly smile on his face. "Sirs, wait a moment." Wei Xi and Feng Zhen stopped in their tracks. When they looked, they saw that it was Li Yin, who was beaming with success. "Sirs, can you give me some advice?" Feng Zhen teased him. "What advice?" "I would like to propose marriage to the Lord." Li Yin said and nodded his head solemnly. Wei Xi, who was at the side, trembled and froze on the spot. He slowly tilted his head to look at him. His ink-like eyes carried a chilly intent. Chapter 866. Unbeknownst to him, Li Yin was still smiling brightly. My father has already asked for the Lord's opinion. Now he's just short of visiting her personally, but The smile on Li Yin's face was unbearable to Wei Xi. I keep feeling that I need to prepare something more. Both of you are experienced and knowledgeable. Why don't you give me some pointers? Oh, is that so? Wei Xi chuckled softly. Li Yin inexplicably felt a tingling chill run down his spine. The chill left as quickly as it came, quickly disappearing without a trace. Feng Zhen was a shrewd man. He acutely noticed that Wei Xi's emotions were a little off, but Li Yin, the simple-minded youth, was too slow to notice. He had an idea. He tiptoed and rested his hand on Li Yin's shoulder. He teased him with a smile. Hanmei is already a man in his 20s. He should have started a family long ago. This is a rare joyous occasion in Wanzhou. It must be a grand affair. It must be done in a lively and joyous manner. Wei Xi's thoughts went astray for a moment, but Feng Zhen would not misunderstand. There were indeed a lot of bachelors in Wanzhou. Now that Li Yin was leaving the group, it was a joyous occasion. Come. Let me, an experienced man, give you a few pointers. There's no use asking Zixiao. He's still facing a big problem himself. Feng Zhen and Li Yin put their arms around Li Yin's shoulders, a mischievous smile on their faces. Li Yin subconsciously felt that Feng Zhen was unreliable, but he was not wrong. Although Feng Zhen was unrestrained, he was still a married man. He had a well-behaved, adorable, and sensible son. What about Wei Xi? It was true that he was gentle and humble, but he was still a bachelor. Asking for pointers on such matters was indeed a little irrational. Please enlighten me, Mr. Feng, Li Yin said obediently. Feng Zhen glanced at Wei Xi out of the corner of his eye. He saw that Wei Xi's brows were furrowed, and there was a hint of forbearance and restraint between his brows. He laughed inwardly. Men should get married when they're of age, and women should get married when they're of age. The two of you are in love with each other. This is truly a golden marriage bestowed by the heavens. Feng Zhen pretended to exaggerate, wishing that he could praise Li Yin and Sheng Guanwan to the heavens. Li Yin, an unmarried young lad, blushed and was so embarrassed that he didn't even know where to place his hands. Feng Zhen even said, "Han Mei, listen to me. You only need to run to the Lord and express your sincere and passionate feelings to the person you love. Believe me, no woman in this world can resist such a passionate and unrestrained confession." Li Yin was so embarrassed that he felt as if smoke was about to come out of his head. He had also said implicit words of love to Shang Guanwan before, but he had never said them so bluntly. Who would have thought that Mr. Feng, who appeared to be a debauchee, was actually a passionate person? His petite body hid a bold and unrestrained soul. Li Yin said shyly in a low voice, "Isn't this too offensive? I'm afraid that Lord will despise me and say that I've offended a beauty." Feng Zhen laughed and said, "What are you afraid of? A chaste woman is afraid of a clingy man. She might say you're rude, but who knows how shy and happy she is in her heart." Li Yin was about to nod when he heard Wei Ci reprimand him while suppressing his anger. How rude, how impudent! Li Yin was stunned. He turned to look at Wei Ci, but all he could see was the other's back as he turned to leave, and his wide sleeves fluttering in the wind. This, Mr. Wei, this is... Once a mild-mannered person got angry, the scene was rather frightening. Even though Li Yin was valiant and brave, he was also shocked at this moment. He didn't know how he had angered the other. Feng Zhen restrained the emotions in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a profound smile. Li Yin muttered, "Mr. Wei has always been self-restrained and polite. Mr. Feng's words just now must have displeased him. Indeed, such a solemn event as a marriage proposal should be carried out with respect, and not blindly guided by Mr. Feng." Feng Zhen heard Li Yin's mutterings and scoffed lightly. He said, "Concern leads to confusion. Even he, Wei Zixiao, is no exception." Li Yin continued to be confused, not understanding what Feng Zhen meant. Feng Zhen saw that his brain wasn't working properly, and gave him a loving look, as if he was looking at his own silly and adorable son. "If you don't understand, then don't think too much. It's useless even if you understand, since the Lord has already agreed to your marriage with Wan Nyangzi, and Wan Nyangzi has feelings for you. You just need to follow the old tradition of the 3 letters and 6 rites, and do it step by step. I'll be waiting to drink your wedding wine." Li Yin was dejected. After going around in circles, Feng Zhen still hadn't come up with any good ideas. After easily dismissing Li Yin, Feng Zhen was so worried that he paced in circles 3 times. Feng Zhen knew that with Wei Ci's brain, even if his IQ went offline, it would only be for a short period of time. Once Wei Ci had time to calm down, he would definitely realize that he had made a mistake. Thinking of this, Feng Zhen hurriedly chased after Wei Ci and shamelessly went to his house. I didn't expect this. Feng Zhen hadn't even entered the main hall, but he was already filled with excitement, as if he had discovered a new continent. Didn't expect what? Wei Ci had been back for a while. He knelt near the table and stared coldly at the boiling tea stove. He already knew that Feng Zhen would come, but he was secretly annoyed at himself for not being patient enough to have such a stupid misunderstanding. I really didn't expect that you, Wei Zixiao, would have such thoughts about your lord. Feng Zhen lightly slapped the table. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make one's heart tremble. When Wei Ci heard this, he suddenly raised his head. His ink-black eyes contained an undisguised sharpness. Sure, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. When did I ever have any disrespectful thoughts about my lord? Feng Zhen had a smile on his face as he sat beside Wei Ci. Just disrespectful thoughts? Feng Zhen wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. It was rare to see Wei Ci being forced into a corner. No matter what, he had to enjoy it. He said aggressively. No matter who it was, when they first heard that Han Mei wanted to propose marriage to my lord, the first thought that came to mind was that he wanted to propose marriage to my lord and marry Shang Guanwan. But you're different. Your first thought was that Han Mei wanted to propose marriage to my lord and marry her. Do you think it's reasonable to say that you don't have any other thoughts about my lord? Wei Ci opened his mouth. His secret thoughts had been exposed by Feng Zhen, and for a moment, he didn't know how to refute. His glib tongue that flowed like a river didn't have any effect on him at all. Absurd. He could only spit out these two words. Feng Zhen, who had been imposing just a moment ago, raised his hand and put it around Wei Si's shoulder the next second, looking like a good brother. My lord isn't married, and you aren't either. Isn't it normal to have such thoughts? Feng Zhen said. Why are you so secretive about it? Look, you almost scared the little angel Han Mei just now. Wei Si raised his hand and brushed Feng Zhen's hand away. His expression was dark and solemn, and he looked at Feng Zhen with even more vigor. How can a person like my lord be disrespected so easily? I don't want to hear such words from you again. Si and my lord are innocent. Chapter 867. Wei Si said, My lord, you have yet to succeed in your hegemony. You should not be hindered by this kind of love affair. At this moment, Feng Zhen made an inelegant gesture of using his little finger to pick at his ear, directly outsmarting Wei Si. Did you hear that right? According to Zixiao's meaning, doesn't that mean that the lord and you are a couple and have an affair? Feng Zhen looked as if he had discovered a new continent. He said, Just now, I only said that you secretly admired the lord, but I never said how the lord reacted to you. Why is it that you and the lord are in love with each other? Could it be that there's more to it? Wei Si's face paled. He realized in hindsight that he had been tricked by Feng Zhen, and was furious. If not for his good upbringing, he would have long lost control of his impulse, and kicked Feng Zhen out of the house. You have a beautiful face and a charming body. You deserve to be loved by others. For example, Xingyue, don't you have many women in your boudoir? There was a hint of slyness in Feng Zhen's eyes as he admired Wei Si's fairy-like face with great interest, revealing the annoyance and shame that only a mortal man could have. He continued, My lord is not an ordinary woman, but she is also a person of flesh and blood. Outstanding women were chased by men, and outstanding men were chased by women. This was a matter of course. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Taking advantage of the fact that no one has an advantage over you, it's better to make a move early than later, when she has her eyes on someone else. The only thing is that I'm afraid only you can marry a woman like Lord Wei Si. After a while Wei Si squeezed his molars and squeezed out a sentence. Prodigal Feng Zhen, your words and actions really live up to your nickname. When Wei Si flared up, Li Yin would be frightened but not Feng Zhen. I'm just teasing you. Why are you so serious? Feng Zhen curled his lips in an unrefined manner. He said, My lord is currently 18 years old. In another 2 years, he should be thinking about marriage. Do you really think that she is an immortal banished from the heavens, living in the wind, eating and drinking dew, with no distractions in her heart and no emotions? Taking 10,000 steps back, Zixiao had placed his lord on a pedestal. But had he ever thought of an heir? I will have to face this problem one day. As an outsider, Feng Zhen naturally saw things more clearly than Wei Si. He could also tell that Wei Si did not treat Jiang Pingji as his lord. He clearly worshipped her as a god, who knew that the gods in Wei Si's eyes were ultimately just mortals with flesh and blood. Feng Zhen's words calmed Wei Si's raging flames for a while. Carrying on the family line is a common human thing. Wei Si said dejectedly, I have never had any improper thoughts towards my lord. It was Feng Zhen's turn to be confused. Adoration was adoration. What was there to avoid about it? Wei Si was about to drown in a jar of vinegar over the blunder just now, but now he refused to admit it. How was this a man who was so bashful? She was clearly a little princess. Feng Zhen said angrily, I really don't know what you're conflicted about. He said to Feng Zhen, There are some things you won't understand until the time comes. With his previous life's experience, Wei Si knew that this matter was not as simple as love between a man and a woman. It involved many entanglements of interests. If his lord was not the final victor, and was destined to fail, what was wrong with Wei Si going all out and confessing his feelings? But he knew that was impossible. His lord would definitely win, and she would create an unprecedented golden age for all the people in the world. Wei Si did not want to be a stain on her reputation, and give those gossipy people a reason to attack her. If possible, he hoped that he could stand by her side and quietly sweep away the pebbles for her, so that she could walk more steadily. Feng Zhen wanted to tease him a little more, but he saw Wei Xi's deep frown. The pain on his face did not seem fake, so he could only stop. He was a prodigal son. How could he understand the principle that the more Wei Xi liked and admired, the more he dared not approach? Ha, it won't be you. It will always be someone else. Feng Zhen folded his hands into his sleeves. Every word he said was like a knife stabbing into Wei Xi's heart. Just now, Han Mei only made a slip of the tongue, and you're already so jealous. When the nightmare comes true, TSK, Feng Zhen added. Why can't you understand? Wei Xi responded with silence. The prodigal son said, I don't understand what you're worried about, but if you think about it carefully, I guess I can guess a thing or two. You're just worried about the gossip of others and the fight for the heirs in the future? It's not difficult to talk about it. Why don't you just change your surname and marry into her family? Wei Xi was speechless. To prevent Feng Zhen from going too far, Wei Xi could not bear it anymore and said, It's not just that. Feng Zhen asked, Then what is it? Wei Xi rubbed his brows and said, Do you think it's possible for my lord to become the emperor? Feng Zhen thought for a while and said, If she can successfully get rid of the calamity of the northern borderline, my lord will be able to add 9 pebbles and become her own emperor. If she could conquer the northern borderline, plus half of Dongqing's territory, it would not be too much to make her own emperor. Wei Xi asked again, If a woman becomes the emperor, will her husband be the ruler? Feng Zhen instinctively wanted to reply, Ridiculous, but he suddenly paused. Wei Xi smiled bitterly and said, If her husband is the ruler, it will undoubtedly be the ruling family of the Empress. The country will not rule the country, and the so-called emperor will become a joke. The important officials of the court can tolerate 1 empress, but can they tolerate 2 or even 3? If the throne is passed to a prince, the fight between the empress relatives will become more and more intense. As you can see, the aristocratic families are at their peak and have military power in their hands. If a male emperor ascends the throne, the harem will become a channel for the aristocratic families to control the emperor. No matter what they do, it will be wrong. It's still a little far to talk about this now, but it will have to be faced eventually. Feng Zhen was stunned. He really did not think so much. Wait, according to what you're saying, is it better to let my lord be childless for the rest of her life? Or should I say, when my lord conquers the world, she will then adopt her brother's son and forcibly hand over the world? How is that possible? Wei Xi's eyes were cold and he said, Getting rid of the father and keeping the son is the best way. After hearing this, Feng Zhen's eyelids twitched violently. Wei Xi said, Forget it, why talk about such a distant matter? If you have nothing else, go home as soon as possible. Wei Xi felt that standing in front of him was an eyesore. Feng Zhen could hear the disdain in Wei Xi's words, but he still shamelessly stayed, thinking about what Wei Xi had said earlier. If my lord could really aspire to the throne, having children would indeed be a problem. In addition, Wei Xi's words also mentioned the problem of the aristocratic families. Nowadays, there were many aristocratic families with armies. It would be fine in troubled times, but if the world gradually moved towards unification, it would become a hidden danger of division again. With my lord's temperament, how could she like to be held back by others? Either she would completely weaken the aristocratic families, or they would retaliate and turn them into mere puppets. The interests of the two were completely opposite, and there was almost no possibility of reconciliation. Feng Zhen frowned and thought of many hypotheses. Wei Xi, who was beside him, had already calmed down. He took down the teapot on the tea stove and showed off his tea skills. Chapter 868. Feng Zhen, who had been tricked by Wei Xi, pondered for a long time, but still had no clue. Wei Xi even kindly made him a cup of tea. Thank you. Feng Zhen thanked him as he accepted it. Just as his lips touched the rim of the cup, he suddenly realized that it was not right. He had almost been fooled by Wei Zixiao. She looked up and saw Wei Xi's frowning eyebrows. His eyes, which seemed to be painted black, flickered with a dense gloominess. Seeing this, Feng Zhen's heart softened. He swallowed the words that were stuck in his throat and did not continue to make things difficult for Wei Si. I'm tired, so I decided to stay in your residence for a while. Feng Zhen's eyes turned as another idea popped into his mind. He said shamelessly, in the past, you and I used to sleep together and talk through the night about world affairs. Now that I think about it, it's been so long. Wei Si glanced at him out of the corner of his eye and said, there are still guest rooms in the residence that are empty. It was not that Wei Si was stingy, but Feng Zhen's sleeping posture was comparable to Lu Zheng's. He was also someone who slept from the head of the bed to the end. Feng Zhen was small and weak, but he was very thick-skinned. He coaxed and pestered his way to Wei Si's master bedroom. While Wei Si was taking a shower, he unrestrained took off his clothes, leaving only his pajamas on, and hurriedly rolled into the bed. Wei Si was a bit of a neat freak. The bed was regularly washed and changed. Even in this sweaty weather, the bed was still clean and tidy, emitting a fresh and natural fragrance. No matter what, it was much better than Feng Zhen's doghole-like bedroom. By the time Wei Si washed up and was ready to sleep, Feng Zhen had already fallen asleep with his limbs spread out. His clothes were slightly open, and his hair was messy. He was sprawled out, taking up most of the space. The weather was still hot, and it was easy to sweat. Feng Zhen did not even take a shower, and just rolled onto his bed. Wei Si thought to himself that when Feng Zhen woke up, he would definitely wash this mattress 3 to 5 times. Wei Si was wearing white pajamas and lay on his side on the other side of the bed. Drowsiness overwhelmed him, and his consciousness slowly drifted into dreamland. At this moment, Feng Zhen deliberately lowered his voice and asked, Zixiao? Zixiao, are you still awake? Wei Si struggled to open his eyes and answered vaguely, what is it? Feng Zhen said, speaking of sleeping together, I suddenly thought of something. You and the Lord seem to have once shared the same bed and slept together? Wei Si narrowed his eyes as he listened, but he was highly vigilant about anything related to Jiang Pingji. When he understood the content of Feng Zhen's question, he was so shocked that his entire body quivered, and all his sleepiness was gone. Feng Zisher, if you don't want to sleep, you should go back to your house earlier. Feng Zhen supported his cheek with one hand and turned sideways to look at Wei Si. That flawless, jade-like face was now filled with complicated emotions. There was embarrassment and shock, as well as the fear of having his secret exposed. It had to be said that this greatly satisfied Feng Zhen's bad taste. No, I'm not leaving. Feng Zhen shamelessly crawled onto the bed and hugged the pillow with both hands. Suddenly, his fingertips touched a roll of something. He reached out and carefully touched it, taking out the scroll. It was actually a scroll that had been carefully put away by someone. Without waiting for him to react, Wei Si's expression changed again, and he uncharacteristically pounced on him. Feng Zhen instinctively dodged and avoided Wei Si. Relying on his agility, he ran away with the scroll. He didn't want to open the scroll, but Wei Si's reaction was too abnormal. TSK, the precious thing on the bedside. Could it be the fire-repelling painting that you usually look at for fun? Feng Zhen escaped quickly and opened the painting quickly. Wei Si was afraid to take action, so he couldn't catch up to him. Feng Zisher. Wei Si was so angry that he took the long sword by the side of the bed and unsheathed it. Feng Zhen was so frightened that his hair stood on end. Was he serious? Feng Zhen quickly glanced at the contents of the painting. When he saw it clearly, he looked at Wei Si with a strange expression. There was no other reason. The woman in the painting was none other than Jiang Pingji. The woman in the painting was sleeping on a flower. The strokes were exquisite and realistic. It was completely different from the current freehand brushwork. This painting was more realistic. The woman's eyelashes were long and slender. Her eyelids trembled slightly, as if she was about to open her tipsy eyes and reveal a pair of clear, watery eyes. That wasn't all, but the woman in the painting was dressed very boldly. It was completely different from the current conservative creative style. Her sleeves were narrow, revealing 2 snow-white wrists. The hem of her skirt was huge, as gorgeous as a blooming peony. In comparison, the hem of her skirt was a little short. It only covered her calves, revealing 2 slender feet. Two silver rings with bells hung on her slender ankles. The woman was sleeping soundly on the ground, because she was drunk. Her sleeping petals were scattered around, making the white look whiter and the red redder. The surrounding rockery overlapped, and the environment was remote and quiet. Here, there was such a breathtaking scene, as if he had seen it with his own eyes. Feng Zheng glanced at the time of the inscription, and raised his eyebrows fearlessly. My lord was only 12 years old at that time. And you already had so many thoughts? The date of the painting was 6 years ago, the first month after Wei Xi's rebirth. At that time, the beauty was sleeping and in full bloom. Wei Xi saw the fallen petals all over the ground. Memories of the past flashed before his eyes. He couldn't bear it and drew. Now that he thought about it, he regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. Feng Zhen had always been someone who couldn't keep his mouth shut. It was hard to say when he would reveal a word or two to his lord. Although Wei Xi's disguise had long been stripped bare in front of Jiang Pingji, he still harbored some hope. Take it back. Wei Xi pointed his sword at Feng Zhen, feeling even more anxious. Although Feng Zhen wasn't afraid of death, he understood the principle of moderation. He couldn't force Wei Xi into a corner. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered. Not to mention that Wei Xi's swordsmanship wasn't bad. Fine, I'll return it to you. Feng Zhen didn't dare to throw the painting over. Instead, he rolled it up and handed it back to Wei Xi. However, he said, I've never seen anyone more hesitant than you. You were still denying it just now. Now that the evidence is irrefutable, I don't know what else you can say. Not only did he draw such a painting in private, he even hid it next to the pillow in the master bedroom. What was he thinking? Did he even need to analyze it? Wei Xi sheathed the sword in his hand, but the gloominess on his face didn't dissipate. Feng Zhen suddenly asked with a smile, Are you afraid of death? Wei Xi had just said that getting rid of the father and keeping the son was the best solution. Now that he was pleased with his lord, he couldn't help but think too much. Of course, Feng Zhen knew Wei Xi's temperament. It was impossible for him to be afraid of death. Feng Zhen calmly prepared to listen to Wei Xi's explanation. Looking at his embarrassed expression, he didn't expect Wei Xi to look absent-minded. If I was afraid, I wouldn't have killed myself back then. Wei Xi barely managed to shut his mouth, and did not manage to say the last word kill. Otherwise, with Feng Zhen's ability to cause trouble, wouldn't he get to the bottom of it? Feng Zhen saw that the alarm had been lifted, and immediately became fearless. Chapter 869. If he wasn't even afraid of death, what else was there to be afraid of? Wei Xi was distracted by Feng Zhen. He was a little tempted, but he suppressed it with his rationality. It's still too early. Feng Longzi found out about this. Wei Xi was mentally prepared for it to be widely publicized. Now that the Lord's hegemony has just taken off, it's really not appropriate to consider personal relationships. If others know about this, not only will the outside world be talking about it, but I'm afraid the Lord's strategists and generals will also have other thoughts. Wei Xi couldn't help but warn Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen was in a particularly good mood now that he had something on Wei Xi. Is it that serious? Knowing that Feng Zhen was deliberately playing dumb, Wei Xi still had to explain patiently. It's much more serious than that. The human heart was sinister, and they were not stingy with using the most despicable and sinister thoughts to speculate about others. Most of the people were ignorant. Once someone took the lead, it wouldn't take long for the affairs of the Lord and her subordinates to be spread everywhere. Open your mouth to start a rumor, but run your legs to refute it. Wei Xi could totally imagine how embarrassing the unofficial history would be, and how nasty the people would say it. This was just the outside world. Wanzhou would also be in turmoil because of this. Wei Xi being roasted on the fire was secondary. He was afraid that some people would be indignant, and think that Jiang Pingji always gave Wei Xi preferential treatment. Once people had such thoughts, there would be more conflicts, and the people's hearts would be scattered. The power in Wanzhou would no longer be united and stable as before. After his rebirth, Wei Xi analyzed his past life many times from the perspective of an outsider. Each time, he made different discoveries and comprehensions. In his past life, the Lord treated her subordinates fairly, rewarded and punished appropriately, and was clear about rewards and punishments. This was one of her strengths. If he wanted to strive for the throne again, this advantage had to be continued. Feng Zhen said tactfully, Zixiao, you don't trust me? Tell me what you can, and never reveal a word about what you can't. Wei Xi snorted. Of course, he knew that Feng Zhen seemed to be unrestrained, but he was actually very careful. I hope so. Feng Zhen said to Wei Xi, I've always felt that something was wrong. Although you didn't say anything, I always felt that you had a lot on your mind. You're sensitive and thoughtful. This is both your strength and your weakness. If there's something that's hard to say, you can tell me. Why do you have to suffer? No matter what sorrowful things were, once they were spoken, they would feel carefree. Wei Xi sneered coldly. If he were to treat Feng Zhen as someone he could confide in, wouldn't the other party be able to grasp hold of his weaknesses? If Feng Zhen threatened him with this and asked him to cover for him, help him skip work, secretly drink, and visit brothels, what should he do? Don't think that Feng Zhen wouldn't do something like that. Wei Xi knew very well what kind of unreliable things Feng Longzi had done in his previous life. He bullied Li Yun, Dian Yin and the other generals, who were all honest people. He cheated them of their salary to buy wine and often skipped work. His crimes were too numerous to list. Happiness should be enjoyed in time. How can it be delayed? Feng Zhen said, when people live to 100 years old, what they seek is to be free and unfettered, to enjoy themselves in the moment. Therefore, he could not understand why Wei Xi was so cautious and indecisive, hoping to have the best of both worlds. But in the end, he could not get anything good from either end. He who is sensitive and thinks too much will not live long. Perhaps there were more inside stories that he did not know, but from what Feng Zhen could see, if Wei Xi continued on like this, he would only hurt himself and others. No, not necessarily hurting others, but definitely hurting oneself. He rolled up the blanket and went to sleep, leaving Wei Xi stunned on the spot with a thoughtful look on his face. On the other side, Li Yin also obediently hired an iceman to hunt a pair of wild geese. The 3 letters and 6 rights were all there. Due to the special circumstances, the whole process only took about half a month. Cheng Jing completed the task that Huang Song had given him perfectly. He had quietly returned with a secret letter from Jiang Pingji and did not attend the wedding. Although time was tight, Jiang Pingji did not mistreat Sheng Guanwan. Everything that needed to be prepared had been prepared for her. It was as if she was marrying her younger sister. Speaking of marrying her younger sister, Jiang Pingji was also experienced. She only cared about the overall situation, and the other details would be taken care of by others. A few days before the wedding, the smile on Li Yun's face never disappeared. Not only did he walk with the wind, but he also floated. However, Sheng Guanwan was perturbed and restless. She always felt that everything now was beautiful like an illusory dream. Once this dream was pierced, she would be beaten back to the cruel reality, and continue to be a widow who was tortured by others and could not see a future. In the words of the livestream's audience, this was called premarital anxiety. Jiang Pingji was busy with work, so she could only entrust Huijun to help her ease Sheng Guanwan's worries, so that one would not overthink things. Huijuan's thoughts were exquisite and incisive. Every sentence she said hit the nail on Sheng Guanwan's head, and the knot in her heart was easily resolved. Under the anxious anticipation of the 2 newlyweds, the day of the wedding finally arrived. As the first bachelor in the Wanzhou group to get rid of a single partner, Li Yun was not only handsome and likable, but he was also popular, so basically all the colleagues who could attend were present. Feng Zhen's wife, Wei Jingxian, even played the role of a blessed wife and helped Sheng Guanwan wring her face. Sister Jingxian, I'm a little nervous. Sheng Guanwan was no longer that immature girl. The last time she got married, she felt that she was not attending a wedding, but her own funeral. But today, her little heart was thumping uncontrollably, making her feel helpless and flustered. Today is the wedding, so you can't speak carelessly, Wei Jingxian said with a smile. Forget everything that happened in the past. Sheng Guanwan was still nervous. She involuntarily clenched her hands under her wide sleeves, leaving shallow fingernail marks on her palms. Li Yin came to fetch the bride on time, and the smile on his face became even more radiant. His life goals were very simple: to take care of his master, marry a wife, and have children. Now that he had both, he was naturally beaming with happiness, smiling so widely that only his teeth could be seen. Feng Jin's Changxing and Feng Zhen's Feng Yi became virgins. Changxing was still young, so she happily rolled around on the bed in the bridal room a few times. Feng Zhen's only son Feng Yi, on the other hand, kept a straight face and silently sat on the bedding. He stayed for a while symbolically before coming down. Feng Yi was the child of Feng Zhen's deceased wife. His appearance was like Feng Zhen's, but his temperament was like his mother's, extremely reserved. Because he was born prematurely, Feng Yi was slightly weaker than Feng Zhen, and rarely appeared in front of others. When the crowd saw Feng Yi, they were so shocked that they forgot how to speak. A guy like Feng Zhen, who had no boundaries, actually gave birth to a serious and refined son. It was a genetic mutation. "Hello, uncles." Feng Yi bowed obediently. At such a young age, he already had the demeanor of a gentleman. "Today is Uncle Hanmei's big day. You don't have to be so formal." Feng Zhen caressed his son's hair and casually dismissed him. He had no choice. With his own son by his side, he couldn't drink to his heart's content. You have to have the demeanor of an elder brother. Don't bully the weak. Feng Yi looked frail, but his demeanor was excellent. He really lived up to the name Feng Zhen had given him. The crowd was dumbfounded. They thought that a prodigal son like Feng Zhen would give birth to a son who was extremely daring and dared to dance on his grave. But what happened? Good bamboo shoots come from evil bamboo. Feng Zhen's face immediately darkened. Who was he calling an evil bamboo? Wanzhou was extraordinarily lively, but elsewhere, the atmosphere was extremely solemn. You don't like it? Lu Shi held a letter in his hand. It had been sent urgently by someone from Jiangpingji half a month ago. In front of him knelt a handsome young man of about 13 or 14 years old. His facial features were somewhat similar to Jiangpingji's. "Your son wouldn't dare." "That's good," Lu Shi said. He picked up his pen and wrote a word at the end of the letter. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."